I, a Marlin A student from the countryside, became the laughingstock of the whole school as soon as I entered the aristocratic school. My classmates looked at me with contempt, and the security guard sneered. How can you come to this place? Can your family afford to grow a tree here? All the classmates around me were laughing at me. However, everyone regretted it when they saw the principal bowing to me one day. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share. If you like this story, please let me know in the comment section. I will update the next part. In front of Linzhou Goen Jinshu Business School, a taxi stopped steadily, and a teenager wearing cheap clothes got out of the car. The security guard at the school gate looked up and immediately showed disdain. Hey kid, this is an aristocratic school. You went to the wrong place? The boy stretched lazily and brushed off the dust on his body. I'm in the right place. I'm a freshman in this school. The security guard sneered. You're a freshman? Do you know how much tuition is here for one semester? From what I see, your family probably can't even afford the tree at the door. The passers-by laughed. The boy was not angry. He took out his cell phone and made a call. Hello, Uncle Lee, I'm at the door and someone won't let me in. 5 minutes later, a burst of hurried footsteps broke the awkwardness. The sweaty principal and a group of people hurried over, bowed 90 degrees, and smiled apologetically. Nephew Marlin, I'm late. Come on, don't stand here. Let your uncle take you in. The security guard's face turned pale instantly. Passers-by stared with their eyes wide open. Their laughter got stuck in their throats, and the whole place was so silent that you could hear a pin drop. Marlin raised the corner of his mouth, turned his head, and said to the security guard who had just laughed at him, I told you, you may not be able to keep your job. My grandfather said that people can dress ordinary, but they must speak respectfully. What kind of boy is he who can make an aristocratic school bow to him? Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share. If you like this story, please let me know in the comment section. I will update the next part. Marlin followed Sam all the way to school without any obstacles, and the process of handling the admission procedures was completely handled for him. This made Marlin secretly nod in his heart to Sam's ability to do things. Nephew, if you have any problems at school in the future, just call me directly, understand? Sam said confidently. Okay. Uncle Lee, I won't be polite then. Marlin responded casually. He didn't mind such a simple and crude arrangement, as long as it could save trouble. Soon, Marlin was taken to the principal's office. The principal handed over a cup of hot tea and smiled amiably. Marlin, I have arranged for you to study in the best college and the best major in our school. The counselor will come over to take care of you in person later. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sound of light high heels at the door, and a woman walked in. She was wearing a white suit and skirt. The slim design set off her graceful curves, and her every move exuded a capable and charming temperament. Principal, where is the new student? It's really rare that he came to me directly, bypassing the dean. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she had some objections to this special arrangement. The principal smiled and pointed at Marlin. This is Marlin. You will be in charge from now on. By the way, this is Dora, your counselor, and she is also the representative of your college. If you have any questions, you can go directly to her. Of course, you can also go to me, the dean. Dora looked Marlin up and down. Her eyes fell on his seemingly ordinary but extremely exquisite clothes. Although she did not recognize that this was a German royal custom brand, as a professional teacher, Dora did not show obvious emotions, but just nodded. Marlin, come with me. You're half a month late, and the other students are already familiar with each other. There will be a class meeting soon, so I'll take you to meet everyone. Marlin said nothing and followed her to the classroom. A faint scent of perfume wafted over, and Marlin subconsciously took a few more puffs, sighing in his heart. Women in this big city are different. Not only are they beautiful, but their perfumes are also so high-end. Dear Zhang, first meeting with classmates. Dora stood at the door of the classroom and patted the table gently. Everyone be quiet. I will introduce you to a new classmate. The classroom was suddenly filled with noise, and the students' eyes fell on Marlin. However, the eyes of these students wrapped in expensive clothes were full of confusion and contempt. That's all? A bumpkin? Ha! How much are all his clothes worth? When did aristocratic schools accept people like this? Under the gaze of the crowd, Marlin calmly walked to the center of the podium and introduced himself. My name is Marlin. I come from a rural area in northeast China. Please take care of me. The whole class was in an uproar, especially after hearing the word rural. Many people couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha! I'm dying of laughter. How can such a person be in the same class with us? Facing such a situation, Marlin remained calm and composed. The word retreat has never appeared in his dictionary, which was taught to him by his grandfather. Okay, everyone, stop arguing, Dora said. It's not the origin of a hero that matters. Let's get along well from now on. Marlon, please find a seat and sit down first. Marlon looked around and found that many people moved subconsciously. Only a girl with long hair and a quiet temperament did not show obvious rejection. Marlon sat next to her. Hello, my name is Marlon. Marlon scratched his head and showed his small white teeth. The girl raised her head and said in a gentle but distant voice, My name is Jessica. Jessica responded briefly and then lowered her head to continue reading, obviously not wanting to chat with Marlon anymore. Marlon didn't mind and tactfully stopped talking. The class meeting continued and Doris suddenly mentioned, One more thing, this semester's donation day has arrived. Everyone should donate according to their ability. Then, she glanced at Marlon and added, Marlon, you don't have to donate. Hearing this, many people chuckled and cast disdainful glances at him. You are indeed a poor ghost. Marlon knew that this so-called donation day was a school tradition, and the donations were used to support the construction of a public welfare school. However, a culture of comparison had long been formed here, and those who donated more naturally had more face. Teacher, I want to donate too. Marlon's voice was loud and firm. Okay, donations are voluntary, just donate if you want to. Dora seemed a little helpless. The donations began, and each student stood up to report the amount. Duncan, $1,000. Rex, $100,000. Jessica, $30,000. Marlon's turn. The whole class focused their attention on him. I'll donate too. Marlon stood up and frowned at the donation QR code. He took out an old-fashioned phone and said with a wry smile, Scanning the code is not very convenient. Can I pay by credit card? As soon as he said this, the whole class burst into laughter. You don't even have a smartphone, and you're still donating? Isn't that ridiculous? Isn't this just pretending to be poor? Marlon didn't care and said calmly, Forget it, I'll go find Uncle Lee and transfer the money to him directly. Everyone thought he was just being perfunctory and looked at him with even more contempt. However, Marlon then left the classroom and went straight to Sam, handing him $500,000 in cash and asking him to donate anonymously. After class, Rex and his two younger brothers walked to Marlon's seat and said coldly, Country bumpkin, remember stay away from New Annuan. Marlon looked up at him and said calmly, Are you talking to me? Nonsense, who else could it be but you? Rex said disdainfully, Don't you even look at your own character? Marlon glanced at his high-end clothes and said seriously, To be honest, I think you are more unsophisticated than me. He said it bluntly, because in his eyes, these common goods were not real luxury at all. Rex was so angry that his face turned blue, but Marlon was too lazy to pay attention to him anymore. Chapter 3, I have the final say. What did you say? Boy, it seems you haven't figured out the rules here yet. Rex sneered, with a hint of contempt in his eyes. Rex, that's enough. Even if your family has a strong background, it won't look good if word gets out that a new classmate from the countryside was bullied by you on the first day. Before Marlon could speak, the class monitor Che Shuyin stood up and spoke for him with dissatisfaction. A bumpkin. Bullying him will only dirty my hands. Rex snorted and was not even interested in looking at Marlon. Woman, are the people in this place so pretentious? Marlon muttered in a low voice, with a little disdain in his tone. When he was 8 years old, he could easily beat a character like Rex to tears. The morning classes were boring, and Marlon couldn't muster up the energy. He had already been forced by his grandfather to finish all the high school courses when he was in junior high school. At noon, the lunchtime he had been looking forward to the most finally arrived. Looking at the dazzling array of dishes in the school cafeteria, Marlon's eyes lit up. In the cafeteria, Marlon visited almost all the counters, ordered a few dishes at each counter, and finally returned to his seat with enough food for 5 or 6 people. If he wasn't worried about waste, he really wanted to try all the dishes. Marlon, is it delicious? A voice sounded from the side. It's okay, but the taste is too bland, not like the taste we have in our hometown. Marlon answered casually without even looking up, concentrating on the chicken drumstick in his hand. Really? Then why do you eat so much? Are you a pig? Ha ha ha. A boy next to him laughed at him. It was Rex's little follower Johnson. The girls in the cafeteria looked at Marlon with disdain when they saw him eating with relish. But Johnson became more and more proud and continued to provoke him. You redneck. I'm talking to you. Why are you ignoring me? Johnson was so angry that he knocked over Marlon's food. The students around were whispering, This new kid is so unlucky. He got into trouble with Rex right after he arrived. It's not a good thing to offend Rex. Marlon raised his head slowly, his eyes getting colder. I hate it most when people disturb me while I'm eating. Although his tone was light, it contained a hint of threat. What? Are you scared now? Johnson saw Marlon stand up and thought that the other party had surrendered, so he became even more unscrupulous. However, the next second, Marlon swung a punch and knocked Johnson out, causing one of his front teeth to fall out and blood to flow from the corner of his mouth. Weaker than the pigs I raise. Marlon clapped his hands, sat back in his seat, and continued eating as if nothing had happened. The students watching were stunned. This kid is so cruel. The Johnson family is not easy to mess with. I'm afraid you will be in big trouble. Half an hour later, in the principal's office. Principal, you have to do something for us? Look at my Johnson. He's been beaten like this. Johnson's mother pointed at her son's face while crying, demanding an explanation. Johnson was the one who provoked me first. I have clearly understood the responsibility. I will only do this for Marlon. Principal Sam said in an unquestionable tone. Johnson's mother was stunned. Then she jumped up and yelled, Principal Lee, are you mistaken? My baby was the one who was beaten. Your son has been spoiled since he was young, so it's not too much for him to suffer a little now. Sam responded indifferently. What? How can a poor country boy like him, with such low quality, be worthy of studying here? He's just a little beast. Johnson's mother pointed at Marlon and cursed. You'd better shut up. Marlon stood up suddenly. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, and Johnson's mother took a step back in fear. Say that again? Marlon's tone was cold, as if he would attack in the next second. Pa! Before she could say anything else, Sam slapped her in the face. You stubborn thing, you have a dirty mouth. Don't blame me for being rude. This. Johnson's mother covered her face and dared not say another word. Get out. Otherwise, I will make sure that your Sioux family will never be able to make a comeback in Linzhou. Sam's last words were like thunder in the ears, making Johnson's mother look ashen. Johnson in dismay. She really couldn't understand how a student from the countryside could be protected by the principal. Chapter 4. The Mysterious Donor. Johnson's mother left. The office suddenly became quiet. Marlon stood there, looking at Sam, and didn't know what to say for a moment. He originally thought that Sam just had some friendship with his grandfather, but the scene just now made him realize that the relationship between the two was much deeper than he thought. Nephew Marlon, don't worry about this. With me at school, no one can bully you. Sam patted Marlon's shoulder, his tone so firm that no one could doubt it. Marlon felt a little embarrassed. After all, he was the one who hit someone, but Sam protected him and made it seem like he was the one being bullied. That woman just now was a foul-mouthed woman, and you didn't go too far in hitting her. Remember, if someone says that to you again, just go up and slap them in the face. Don't be polite. Sam's tone was full of pride, and Marlon couldn't help but nod his head. These words were exactly what he was thinking. Uncle Lee, what is your relationship with my grandfather? Also, what does my grandfather do? He seems very mysterious. Marlon finally asked the question that had been bothering him for years, hoping to get an answer from Sam. Sam smiled slightly, but shook his head. Your grandfather didn't tell you, of course he has his reasons. But what I can tell you is that if Johnson's mother's words just now were heard by your grandfather's men, the Sioux family would be removed from Linzhou tomorrow. Marlon was stunned after hearing this, and he felt mixed emotions. How deep was his grandfather's background? This question had been bothering him since he was a child. After walking out of the principal's office, Marlon returned to the classroom door and happened to meet the head teacher, Dora. Marlon? Who asked you to come back? Dora was obviously a little surprised. After all, he knew about the farce in the cafeteria at noon, and he had just organized a meeting in the class to discuss it. The principal asked me to come back. Marlon said casually, and then walked straight into the classroom, ignoring the looks from everyone around him. In the classroom, other students looked at Marlon with complicated eyes. In the morning's disgust and indifference, there was a hint of fear. They were afraid that this barbarian would attack them again and knock their teeth out. Marlon sat back in his seat. Jessica subconsciously moved to the side to distance herself from him. Marlon looked at her movements and just smiled helplessly. Dora confirmed Marlon's words. She returned to the podium and did not mention the cafeteria incident again, but instead talked about another piece of news. Everyone, please pay attention. There is good news coming from the principal's office this afternoon. Someone donated money to the school. And it was not money that was donated, but an entire teaching building. The whole class was shocked. What? Donating a whole building? How much money would it cost? At least hundreds of millions? Could it be that country boy Marlon? He seems to be the only one who has never donated to the class fee, but he said he would go directly to the principal. Are you kidding? Does he look like a rich man? With his rustic appearance, is he worthy of it? The students discussed the matter at once and finally came to the conclusion. It could be anyone except Marlon. Marlon looked depressed. He clearly didn't say he wanted to donate anonymously, but he didn't bother to explain. He guessed that Sam might have concealed his name because he didn't want to be too conspicuous. The farce of the day finally ended. Marlon returned to the dormitory and lay comfortably on the bed. He sighed with satisfaction, and the other 3 people in the dormitory looked at each other silently, and no one dared to say more. After what happened at noon, their impression of Marlon had long changed from country bumpkin to barbarian. Here, I brought some good stuff, one for each of you. Marlon took out a few beautifully packaged hams from the suitcase and distributed them to his roommates. Marks took the ham and said with disdain, "What a crappy ham. You treat it like a treasure." After that, he threw the ham into the trash can. Who said it wasn't? He has offended Rex and his gang, and I don't want to be implicated. Danny also agreed and threw the ham away. Although this thing is not rare, it is a gift from someone else after all. It's not appropriate for you to do this. Paul advised in a low voice, seeming a little uneasy. Paul, do you think it's your turn to speak in this dormitory? Mark snorted. Hurry up and sweep the floor. It's your turn to be on duty this week. Paul gritted his teeth and didn't refute. He came from a poor family and had earned his living with the money his family gave him. In order to avoid trouble, he endured all kinds of grievances. Just as he picked up the mop and prepared to clean, a hand pressed on his shoulder. Paul looked up and saw Marlon standing in front of him. The duty is rotated. Why should he do it alone? Marlon's tone was calm, but with irresistible power. Marks was glared at by Marlon and immediately got scared. He picked up the mop and went to clean the house with Danny. Thank you. What are you thanking me for? I just don't like bullying. Marlon shrugged and picked up 2 hams from the trash can. Fortunately, they are packaged. Otherwise, it would be a shame to waste them. He tore open a piece of ham and started to eat it with a very satisfied expression. This is not an ordinary ham. It is specially supplied by the royal family, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars on the market. Marlon said while eating, making Paul's eyes widen. The next morning, Marlon got up reluctantly and went to class. As soon as he stepped into the classroom, he saw Johnson, who was beaten by him yesterday. Marlon smiled apologetically, but he didn't expect that Johnson was so scared that his legs went weak when he saw him, and he didn't even dare to look at him. Johnson, what's going on? Are you just going to let that country bumpkin go? Seeing this, Rex frowned and asked in confusion. Chapter 5, The Prince of Tennis. Don't mention it. My mom scolded me when I got home yesterday. She also said that if I have anything to do with Marlon again, she would kick me out of the house. Johnson had a bitter look on his face, and his tone was full of helplessness. What kind of luck does this country bumpkin have? G. Rand frowned and complained, with an expression of disbelief. Could it be that this guy really has some background? Rex narrowed his eyes and looked at Marlon's back, with a complicated look in his eyes. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong, and it felt like things were not that simple. Boss, you're worrying too much. I heard that Marlon actually picked up the ham thrown into the trash can in the dormitory and ate it yesterday. Judging from his behavior, he is definitely a poor guy. G. Ran echoed. Really? Rex sneered after hearing this, thinking that he was overthinking. He thought to himself, he's just a bumpkin who got lucky. The morning class ended quickly. Marlon was struggling to decide whether to go to the next class when he suddenly heard a classmate from the next class say that it was a physical education class, and it was a tennis match between the 2 classes. Marlon slapped his head and muttered to himself, It seems I have to buy a smartphone, otherwise I won't even know the class schedule. Marlon put on his sportswear, which he hadn't worn for many years, and paired it with the world's exclusive customized sneakers and a customized racket worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He ran to the tennis court excitedly with everyone. He was full of expectations. After all, his grandfather had cultivated his sports skills meticulously since he was a child. He was good at table tennis, and golf. Tennis was just a piece of cake for him. Look, that guy is here too. On the tennis court, Rex's followers couldn't help but mock Marlon when they saw him approaching with a racket. Marlon, you dare to come here to buy a cheap racket for just a few dozen dollars? The worst rackets here start at tens of thousands of dollars. Is a gentleman's sport something you can play? Go back now. Faced with these harsh words, Marlon just smiled. He was too lazy to care. In his opinion, these people's superiority complex was so childish that it was like a joke. At the beginning of the game, the players of Shansai Class 5 were more skilled and dominated the players of Shansai Class 2. On the side of the court, the cheerleaders of Shansai Class 5 were very enthusiastic and cheered for their players. On the other hand, the cheerleaders of Shansai Class 2 had completely lost their confidence. Too weak, go back and practice for a few more years. Lin Zifeng, the Physical Education Committee member of Business Talent Class 5, said coldly after easily defeating Rex. His ridicule made the girls in Business Talent Class 5 even more excited, while the girls in Business Talent Class 2 lowered their heads and didn't even have the energy to refute. How dare you play at this level? Marlon looked at Rex panting and couldn't help shaking his head. He was speechless about the technical level of this game. What do you mean? If you think you can do it, then go ahead. Rex, who was too humiliated to raise his head, suddenly looked up and saw Marlon shaking his head, and he was immediately furious. I'll do it if I want. Marlon picked up his racket and walked slowly to the center of the court. He couldn't stand watching it anymore, and he wanted to go up and do some exercise. Okay, if you can win this game, we will lose. Lin Zifeng glanced at Marlon and said with some contempt. The members of the 5th class of business talents burst into laughter. This kid probably doesn't even know the rules of tennis. Look at his racket. It doesn't even have a brand name. It must be a cheap product. Haha. Marlon stood on the court, ignoring the sarcasm around him. He casually waved his racket and said softly, "Come on, don't waste time." Lin Zifeng's face darkened, and he sent a ball at a tricky angle, full of power, straight to the baseline. However, Marlon turned his wrist slightly, and the tennis ball drew an arc and landed precisely in the outside corner where Lin Zifeng could not reach at all. Score! As soon as the referee's voice fell, the whole audience fell silent. The cheerleading team of Business Talent Class 2 burst into cheers instantly. Marlon, come on! Even the girls who originally disliked Marlon couldn't help but cheer for him at this moment. Lin Zifeng frowned. You're quite capable. He readjusted his state, but no matter how he changed his skills, Marlon could easily resolve it, and even hit the ball to a position where he had no time to react. A few minutes later, the last ball landed and Lin Zifeng failed to catch it. Marlon won the game with a crushing advantage. Marlon! Marlon! The girls in the second business class cheered loudly. Marlon's performance not only impressed them, but also made them forget the label of Marlon as a country bumpkin. Rex's face was livid at the sidelines, and he was filled with regret. If I had known he was so good at tennis, I would never have given him the chance to show off. Marlon put away his racket with a faint smile on his face. To him, this was just an ordinary tennis game, and he didn't care what others thought of him. Who is he? Lin Zifeng stood aside, looking at Marlon's back with complicated eyes. He had never met an opponent who easily crushed him like Marlon. If he knew that Marlon just wanted to play tennis, he would be even more speechless. Chapter 6 Dora's Heartache. How is it? Marlon casually took out a tissue, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and walked back to the team of Shansai Class 2 with a faint smile on his face. Marlon, you are really amazing. I feel like you are no different from a professional athlete. Elsa, a girl with freckles on her face, praised sincerely, her eyes full of admiration. Although she doesn't understand tennis, she thinks Marlon plays so beautifully, and his swing is full of natural rhythm. However, not everyone agrees with her. You dare to compete with professional athletes? Elsa, do you have poor eyesight? If you can't play, don't talk nonsense. You look like an amateur. Lily sneered and looked at Marlon with disdain. She is a famous, white, rich, and beautiful girl in the class. Not only does she have a good family background, she is also the best friend of the class beauty Jessica. She always looks down on poor people like Marlon who are dressed in ordinary clothes. How can you say that? Marlon just won the game for our class and brought honor to us. Although Elsa is introverted, she gritted her teeth and defended Marlon at this moment. When Glory? With just these crappy skills? I think he's just lucky. Lily sneered, her hands on her hips. Has anyone seen him wear decent clothes? He looks like a country bumpkin all day long. It's embarrassing enough just to stand in our class, right? She turned and glanced at the other students, as if seeking approval. Yes, Lily is right. I also think that Marlon just won against Lin Zifeng by luck. It's nothing big. Several classmates around echoed this. Most people did not want to offend Lily, and were even too lazy to discern the truth. Echoing her was the easiest choice. Marlon sneered in his heart, but didn't say much. He originally thought that this competition would help him get closer to his classmates, but Lily, the tiger mother, obviously didn't intend to treat him well. He turned around, patted Elsa's shoulder, smiled, and said, "Thanks, sister. Your support is enough." After saying that, he turned around and left in a cool manner, ignoring the sarcasm. Elsa stared at his back blankly, her face slightly reddened, and she said softly, "You're welcome." But the voice was so small that only she could hear it. After the physical education class, Marlon was in a good mood. After stretching his muscles and sweating, he felt much more relaxed. However, when he took out his mobile phone, the smile on his face froze. This is a satellite phone that his grandfather praised to the sky. It is said that this phone uses the 7G communication technology that has not yet been released. Not only does it always have a signal, but it is also strong enough to fall from an 18-story building without any damage. But in Marlon's opinion, this thing is ugly and useless. Not only are there no games, there isn't even a function to check class timetables. This broken thing is just a decoration. Marlon shook his head helplessly and decided to buy a new phone after class. He came to the largest mobile phone store near the school, and as soon as he entered the door, two waiters came to greet him. But after seeing his rustic outfit, they exchanged glances, and their professional smiles instantly became stiff. "I'm going to get some water for the customers. I'm going to the bathroom." The two men made up an excuse and turned away, leaving Marlon completely alone. Marlon looked around and found that the other waiters were busy serving customers who looked more high quality. He sighed, found a corner to sit down helplessly, and picked up the free cookies in the store to eat. The taste of the cookies was mediocre, but it was better than going hungry. "Marlon?" A familiar voice came from behind, with a hint of doubt in its tone. Marlon turned around, his mouth full of cookies, and mumbled, "Oh." The natural mouse in the room turned out to be Teacher Dora. The person who came was Dora, the beautiful counselor of Marlon's class. She was wearing a white business suit, with long straight legs and half-tied hair, with a few strands of black hair hanging in front of her pretty face. She exuded an intellectual and elegant temperament. "It's dinner time now. Why don't you go to the school cafeteria?" Dora just opened her mouth and saw the cookies in Marlon's hand and the ordinary clothes he was wearing, and her heart was shocked. Is his family so poor that he can't even afford the food in the cafeteria? Dora's imagination was instantly activated. She thought of Marlon's usual low-key demeanor and the scene she just saw, and her eyes actually became slightly red. She thought to herself, a poor student who should be enjoying his youth can only silently endure the hardships of life. This child is really pitiful. "Teacher Lee, what's wrong with you?" Marlon noticed Dora's abnormality, drank a few sips of mineral water, and asked curiously. Chapter 7: Buying a Cell Phone. Hearing Marlon's question, Dora came back to her senses. She subconsciously wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with her slender fingers, and her face returned to calm. She wanted to comfort Marlon, to encourage him to keep moving forward despite the difficulties at home, to eat well, and not to take bad care of his body. However, she swallowed the words back. But I thought to myself, since Marlon is hiding here, eating cookies, he must not want to be noticed. This is the boy's self-esteem at work. I must not expose him. So Dora picked up a free cookie on the table, pretended to take a bite, and said with a smile, "Well, this cookie is delicious, classmate Marlon. I often come here to eat free cookies. It's really good." Marlon was stunned for a moment. His expression froze instantly, and a few black lines crossed his forehead. He thought, this teacher must have a taste problem. This cookie is so unpalatable that I have to drink half a bottle of mineral water before I can swallow it. How can she say it's delicious? Seeing Marlon's strange expression, Dora thought she had hurt his self-esteem, so she kept silent. She could only chew the biscuits with gritted teeth, cursing in her heart. This biscuit is so disgusting. To break the awkwardness, Marlon coughed and said, "Mr. Lee, go do whatever you want. I'm waiting for the counter clerk to serve me to buy a mobile phone, and then I'll leave after I buy it." Dora heard this. A hint of doubt flashed in her eyes, but she nodded and agreed. "Okay, I'll buy a phone too. Then you do your thing, I'll go take a look first." Dora walked to the counter, and before she could say anything, a fat figure came up to her. It turned out to be the manager of the mobile phone store. He was all smiles and served Dora personally. Marlon saw this and wanted to cry but couldn't. It's really frustrating to compare yourself with others. I've been waiting for almost 2 hours, and even the waiter didn't bother to pay attention to me. But Mr. Lee, the manager, came straight to me. Soon, under the enthusiastic recommendation of the manager, Dora bought a new model of Apple mobile phone. After checking out, she passed by Marlon with the box and asked with a smile, "Marlon, why are you still here?" Marlon spread his hands, looking helpless. "Teacher, I also want to leave quickly, but no one greets me, and I haven't bought a mobile phone yet. Dora frowned slightly after hearing this. She originally thought that Marlon came to the mobile phone store just to get free cookies, but now it seems that he really intends to buy a mobile phone. She couldn't help but ask, "Are you really going to buy a mobile phone?" Of course, how can this be fake? Marlon took out his satellite phone from his pocket and placed it in front of Dora. Teacherly, look, this phone was made by my grandfather for me. It is said to use the most advanced black technology in the world, and it is indestructible and has unparalleled functions, but it is not a smartphone at all. It is useless to me except for answering calls. So I have to change to a phone that can access the internet. Watching Marlon seriously praising the brick satellite phone, Dora couldn't help laughing and thought, this guy is quite interesting. But after laughing, she felt a little sad. He has never even used a smartphone. His family must be poor. This student is so pitiful. She suddenly made up her mind, turned to Marlon and said, "Student Marlon, let me buy you a mobile phone." Marlon was stunned and waved his hand to refuse. "Teacher Lee, how can this be? I have money, I can buy it myself. Don't think too much. You're my student. Buying you a mobile phone is nothing. Save the money and go to the cafeteria to eat something good. At your age, you're growing up and nutrition is very important." This, Marlon wanted to refuse, but Dora had already taken his hand and said with a smile, "Don't be shy. Follow me. When you graduate in the future, just remember to help others like your teacher did." Marlon was reluctantly pulled to the counter. Dora held his hand, and the soft touch made him feel dazed for a moment, thinking, this teacher's hand is so soft, like cotton, so comfortable to hold. When the counter manager saw Dora and Marlon coming over, he immediately put on a professional smile on his face. "Ms. Lee, are you here to change your phone? Is there a problem with the one you just used?" "No." Dora shook her head, pointed at Marlon, and said, "This is my student. I want to buy him a mobile phone. Do you have any recommendations?" The manager's eyes lit up, and he immediately started to sell her. "Ms. Lee, take a look at this newly launched Huawei P60, which is equipped with a 200-megapixel camera, is waterproof and dustproof, and has an ultra-long battery life. The original price is 24,999 yuan, but I'll give you a 20% discount, only 19,999 yuan. There is also this Black Mi 50, the king of cost-effectiveness, with performance comparable to Huawei P60, and the price is only 9,999 yuan, and there is a special discount today. In addition, there is Samsung's top-of-the-line Note 18, the flagship among flagships." After the manager gave a long explanation, he took a sip of water and asked with a smile, "Ms. Lee, which one do you think is suitable?" Dora nodded slightly, turned around and asked Marlon, "Student Marlon, which one do you like? The teacher will buy it for you." Marlon lowered his head and thought for a moment, then pointed to a mobile phone in the corner and said simply, "Let's take this one." The manager looked in the direction of Marlon's finger, and the smile on his face froze and then darkened. Chapter 8. The Priceless Cell Phone. Manager Kai resisted the urge to hit someone and stared at the phone that Marlon had just pointed at. It was an old model that had been out of the market for many years, and it was sealed in the corner of the counter, even covered with a layer of dust. Its price tag was no longer the bright, hot selling price, but a glaring number, 498 yuan. There were also old prices that were crossed out many times next to it. 998 and 598 were clearly visible. Manager Kai's face darkened instantly. He had just been trying hard to sell those high-end models for a long time, hoping to get a considerable commission, but he didn't expect to be brought back to reality by Marlon's words. "Young man, are you kidding?" "Huh, how funny." Manager Kai tried to save the situation with a dry laugh. "Manager, I'm not kidding." Marlon deadpanned, "I think this phone is good and suitable for me." Manager Kai's mouth twitched, and he almost uttered a swear word. Marlon actually didn't have to afford an expensive phone. He had originally planned to pick the latest brand name model, but when he thought about Dora paying for it, he felt embarrassed to be too ostentatious. Especially the phones that Manager Kai recommended all at once. The cheapest one cost 9,999 yuan. Marlon thought, "Isn't this a ripoff?" "Marlon, are you sure you want this phone?" Dora was a little surprised and couldn't help but remind him, "It's too cheap and may get stuck when you use it. You don't have to save money for me. It's okay for the teacher to buy you a better one." Marlon smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Teacher Lee, this phone is enough. A phone is just a tool. There's no need to be too particular about it. Besides, aren't you worried that I'll develop a competitive mentality if I get an expensive phone?" Dora was stunned by this, and then nodded in agreement. You are right, Marlon. You are really sensible. She sighed again in her heart. I bought a top-of-the-line Apple phone, but Marlon chose the cheapest old model. This kid is more conscious than me. Okay, Manager Kai, let's take this phone. Dora had no choice but to turn to Manager Kai and say. Manager Kai felt his heart bleed. He wanted to try again. This phone may not perform well. How about looking at other models? That's it, Manager. Hurry up and take it out. Marlon said crisply, with a hint of urging in his tone. Manager Kai gritted his teeth, forced a smile, and turned to get his phone from the counter. He kept cursing in his heart. You poor boy who has never seen the world is wasting my time. Soon, Manager Kai took out the phone and handed it to Marlon. His movements were perfunctory, and he was even too lazy to give him the phone box. Marlon took the phone, dusted it off, and pressed the power button. The phone made a familiar old ringtone, and after the screen lit up, he played with it for a while and smiled with satisfaction. Not bad. This phone is pretty good. You're such a jerk, Manager Kai complained in his heart, but said expressionlessly. Pay, WeChat, Alipay, or cash? Dora took out her phone and was about to scan the code to pay when Marlon suddenly said, Wait a minute. Manager Kai was stunned and frowned slightly. Why? Are you still not satisfied? Marlon smiled, took out his satellite phone from his pocket, and put it on the counter. Manager, this is my old phone. I plan to use it to pay for some money. How much do you think it is worth? Manager Kai looked down at the satellite phone and nearly choked himself to death. He almost wanted to yell, What the hell is this? Are you going to pay for it with a brick? You! Manager Kai was so angry that his hands were shaking. Young man, are you kidding me? Manager, you have to know the goods, Marlon said with a smile. My mobile phone is not an ordinary product. It is the world's top black technology. Its performance is beyond imagination. Marlon spoke. He began to demonstrate the powerful functions of the satellite phone. He spoke with great details and even gave some half-true and half-false examples to praise the satellite phone to the sky. Dora, who was standing by, shook her head and thought, Marlon is a very good fool. However, just when she thought Manager Kai was about to lose his temper, she noticed that his expression changed. Manager Kai wanted to interrupt Marlon's performance, but when he accidentally glanced at the code on the back of the satellite phone, he froze. He took a closer look, his breathing became rapid, and a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. Is this the logo of the Xingyao military factory? Manager Kai's heartbeat quickened and his palms began to sweat. As a senior mobile phone enthusiast, he had seen this logo in a long-discontinued niche technology magazine. This was a product of a world-class military factory, and this phone was made for high-ranking military officials and was not available on the market. Manager Kai swallowed his saliva and said in a trembling voice, Is this the phone from Xingyao military factory? Wow, the manager actually knows what he's talking about. Marlon raised an eyebrow, looking surprised. This phone was given to me by my grandfather. I'm not used to it anyway, so I might as well exchange it for money. Manager Kai immediately did not dare to neglect him and became respectful. Young man, this phone is a priceless treasure. A priceless treasure? Marlon smiled and casually pushed the phone in front of Manager Kai. Then I'll give it to you. Let's give this 498 yuan phone a half-price discount. It won't be a loss no matter how you calculate it, right? Manager Kai's mouth twitched, but he didn't dare to refuse and nodded repeatedly. Okay. He was so happy in his heart. This is a windfall. This phone is not just a profit, it's a huge fortune. Chapter 9. Crescent Hotel. Manager Kai hurriedly caught the satellite phone that Marlon threw to him, just like grabbing a hot coal. As soon as his shaking hands touched the phone, he immediately put it back on the counter carefully, as if it might explode at any time. A huge wave of emotion rose in his mind. This kind of mobile phone is not something that ordinary people can use. If you touch this thing, you may get into big trouble. Young man, this phone is too expensive. I dare not accept it. Manager Kai smiled awkwardly, the fat on his face trembling constantly. As for the price of the phone, I'll give you a 10% discount and charge you 49 yuan. How about that? 10% off? Marlon raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect Manager Kai to be so generous. He was satisfied with the change in Manager Kai's attitude and nodded secretly. Finally, he didn't have to suffer the cold stare anymore. Manager Kai, right? Marlon asked casually. Yes. Manager Kai smiled widely and was extremely excited. The big shot actually remembered my name. If I mention me to my elders at home, maybe I can get a promotion. Teacher Lee, let's pay and go. Marlon pushed Dora, who was standing there in a daze. Dora woke up from her daze and looked at Manager Kai with confusion, then looked at Marlon, as if she still didn't understand why Manager Kai believed Marlon is nonsense. Teacher Lee, please pay. You won't default on your debt, will you? Marlon grinned and teased. Oh, okay. Dora hurriedly took out her mobile phone, scanned the code to pay 49 yuan, and then walked out of the mobile phone store with Marlon. As soon as she walked out of the door, Dora couldn't help asking, Student Marlon, do you know the manager? Why did he believe what you said? Marlon touched his nose and said lightly, maybe my personal charm is too strong. Dora rolled her eyes, obviously not believing it. But she didn't ask any more questions, just thinking to herself, this kid must have some background, otherwise the mobile phone store manager wouldn't compliment him so much. By the way, Marlon, did you eat enough free cookies just now? Dora suddenly changed the subject, as if she wanted to lighten the atmosphere. How can I be full? That food doesn't satisfy my hunger at all. I guess there are only leftovers in the school cafeteria now. Oh, it's that cell phone store that wasted my time. Marlon complained angrily. Hearing Marlon's stomach growling, Dora couldn't help but laugh. Okay, stop complaining. Let's go. I'll treat you to dinner. Teacher Lee, how can I say this? You just bought me a mobile phone. I really don't want to trouble you again. Marlon said politely, but he swallowed involuntarily. Gurgle, gurgle, his stomach made louder sounds. Marlon rubbed his belly and cursed in his heart. What a shame. This uncooperative belly failed me at the critical moment. Dora suppressed her laughter and poked Marlon's abdomen with her finger. Don't be stubborn. Your stomach has agreed for you. Come on, I know a good restaurant nearby. I'll take you there for a good meal. Marlon nodded and followed Dora silently. 10 minutes later, Dora parked the car in front of a magnificent hotel. Marlon looked up and saw 3 golden characters Crescent Hotel on the huge sign at the door. Teacher Lee, isn't this store a bit too expensive? Marlon couldn't help but ask. It's okay. I'll take you to try something new. Dora waved her hand and said with a smile. Besides, how much can you eat? It's only 1 or 200 yuan at most. It won't cost much. Hearing this, Marlon laughed inwardly. Teacher Lee, you really underestimated my appetite. In fact, Marlon's appetite has been unusual since he was a child. He can eat the same amount of food as more than a dozen people in one meal. Half a cow is barely enough for him. Although he is thin, he weighs nearly 200 kilograms, all of which are solid muscles. It seems that we should eat this meal in moderation, otherwise it will go bad if Teacher Lee goes bankrupt. Marlon sighed inwardly and followed Dora into the restaurant. The Crescent Hotel is indeed worthy of being the only 6-star hotel in Linzhou City. As soon as I entered the door, 2 rows of receptionists in Cheongsam said in unison, Welcome. Their voices were uniform and their movements were elegant. The high-slit design of the Cheongsam showed off the long, white legs to the fullest. Marlon glanced at it and secretly sighed. This size is amazing. Dora was obviously used to this kind of scene, and she calmly led Marlon inside. A receptionist came forward and asked with a smile, Ma'am, how many people are you? You two, please take a quiet seat. Dora said casually. Okay, please follow me. The receptionist politely led the way and brought them to a beautifully decorated box. As soon as they sat down, Marlon couldn't help but ask, Teacher Lee, is this place very expensive? I don't see any prices on the menu. It's a bit expensive, but it's okay to come here once in a while. Dora smiled. Besides, today is your teacher's treat, so eat as much as you want. Don't be polite. Marlon smiled awkwardly, but started thinking in his heart. It seems that I can only eat about 60% full with this meal. I can't eat the teacher bankrupt. The waiter brought hot towels and tea, and stood by respectfully waiting for the order. Dora picked up the menu, ordered a few special dishes, and asked Marlon, Marlon, what else do you want to eat? Marlon glanced at the menu and agreed. Just let the teacher order. I'll just eat whatever I want. But his eyes stayed on the roasted whole lamb and lobster set meal on the menu for a moment. Dora was keenly aware of Marlon's gaze, and she curled her lips and said with a smile, Waiter, add another roasted whole lamb and lobster set meal. Chapter 10 Menu Controversy. Marlon was nearly blinded by the glare. 2 rows of straight, slender legs were right in front of him, dazzlingly white. His heartbeat quickened, and his cheeks turned red. Although he tried to pretend to be calm, his body's honesty exposed everything. Marlon is 18 years old this year, a freshman in college, and still a pure young man. His friends have experienced the so-called happiness of adulthood early. However, He was suppressed by his grandfather using the excuse of family secret cultivation. You can't lose your virginity, otherwise all the efforts of more than 10 years of cultivation will be wasted. His grandfather's words made him miserable, and he was even deprived of the freedom to secretly read pornographic books. But today, the impact of those 2 rows of long legs almost made him go insane in his practice. Marlon, you have a nosebleed. The beautiful teacher Dora, who was traveling with us, looked worried. No, it's okay. Marlon quickly took out a tissue to plug his nostrils, pretending to be indifferent, and followed Dora into the hotel. The hotel was luxuriously decorated, and the waiter greeted us with a professional smile. Would you like to sit down or in a private room? Just sit around on the first floor, Dora said casually. After the 2 sat down, the waiter handed over a menu. Marlon was staring at the huge seafood tank in a daze when he suddenly heard the waiter chuckle and say, Madam, this menu is in English and French, which is convenient for foreign guests. Are you sure you want him to order? Will he understand it? Although the tone was polite, it contained contempt. Dora was about to retort, but Marlon beat her to the punch. What are you changing? It's nothing. He took the menu, coughed lightly, and began to read. French foie gras, 399 euros per portion. Truffle rice, 199 euros per portion. New Zealand steak, 599 euros per portion. At first, the waiter looked at him with disdain, thinking that Marlon was just pretending. But he became more and more fluent, with standard pronunciation that sounded like he had walked out of a foreign movie, and even handled some French nasal sounds perfectly. The font on the menu is too small. It makes my eyes sore. Marlon finished reading the last dish, pushed the menu aside, and looked up calmly. The waitress next to him was stunned. She had a master's degree in foreign languages, and her spoken English was top-notch. She originally thought that Marlon was a bumpkin, but now she felt like she had been slapped in the face. Chapter 11 Doubt? The waitress's confident smile gradually froze. She had never thought that her language talent, which she was so proud of, would be worthless in front of a seemingly ordinary young man. Marlon's professional broadcasting voice made her feel ashamed, as if her 7 years of hard work had gone to waste in an instant. Were you born in England or France? She stammered, with a hint of flattery in her tone. Marlon took a sip of tea, shook his head slightly, and raised a sly smile. No, I'm a genuine Northeasterner. The next second, he said in an authentic Northeastern accent. What's wrong? Are you shocked? The waitress was stunned. How could a young man who spoke only Northeastern dialect master such top-notch English and French language skills? Impossible, she asked again. Then your parents are linguistics professors who returned from abroad? Marlon couldn't help laughing. Professor? My parents didn't even go to college. My dad graduated from high school, and my mom graduated from junior high school. They do like traveling, and at most they can be considered world travel enthusiasts. The waitress was completely speechless, but her curiosity was still stirring. So, how did you learn English and French? Marlon waved his hand casually and said lightly, Oh, nothing. When I was a child, my grandfather picked up a secondhand radio that could listen to foreign radio dramas. Some of those programs did not have subtitles, which annoyed me so much that I read through the dictionary at home and memorized them. Later, when I understood them, I imitated them for a few days. Alas, the broken radio broke down in a month. The waitress's eyes nearly popped out of her head. 1 month? Memorizing a dictionary? Imitation for a few days? And she has mastered the broadcasting voice? Is she still a human being? Sir, you are a genius, she exclaimed sincerely. Thank you for the compliment. I'm just an ordinary person. Marlon smiled modestly, and the next second, his stomach rumbled with hunger. Can we order now? I'm starving. When ordering, Marlon directly ordered 5 servings of egg fried rice, 3 bowls of egg noodles, braised eggplant, and tomato scrambled eggs, with 10 bowls of rice. The waitress almost thought she had misheard. This is a 6-star hotel. You order these home-cooked dishes. Are you serious? By the way, give my teacher a New Zealand steak with truffles, abalone, and ginseng soup. Marlon handed over the menu casually, looking as if it was a matter of course. The waitress resisted the urge to leave. Back in the kitchen, she added a sales limit reminder next to these cheap dishes, fearing that she would encounter such an outrageous customer again. When the food was served, Dora couldn't help but look at Marlon with complicated eyes. Student Marlon, I think I know who you are. Marlon was startled, his heart pounding. Oh no, could it be that she saw through my prominent family background? It's my fault for pretending too much just now. Chapter 12 Indirect Kiss. Marlon's mind raced, wondering how he should respond to Dora's questions if his hidden identity was exposed. But just as he was lost in thought, Dora spoke first. I heard from the principal that our school has a top scorer in the college entrance examination. It is said that his grades are very good. I guess you were that top scorer, right? Top scorer in the college entrance examination? Me? Marlon was stunned, with a lot of questions in his mind. How come I didn't know that I became the top scorer in the college entrance examination? Stop pretending, Marlon. Doris smiled slightly, revealing an expression that sees through everything. I know that you academic masters like to play dumb and then make a stunning appearance when the results are announced. The teacher also went through this in the past. It's so familiar. Marlon cried out in his heart. Teacher, what do you know? I'm not pretending. But seeing Dora's confidence, he simply walked down the stairs. Hey, teacher, since you have a keen eye for talent, then I won't pretend. That's right. I am the top scorer in the college entrance examination. As soon as he finished speaking, he buried his head and continued to eat, not paying any attention. Marlon was like a whirlwind on the table, finishing 5 servings of egg-fried rice in one mouthful, so fast that the waiter who served the dishes was stunned. Eat slowly and don't choke. Dora handed over her cup of water. Marlon took the water cup and gulped down a few mouthfuls. But after finishing, he found Dora's lipstick mark on the edge of the cup. This was a water cup she had just used. For a moment, Marlon's brain froze. Isn't this an indirect kiss? His face instantly turned red, and he stammered an apology. Teacher Lee, I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. Dora was also a little embarrassed, but she pretended to be calm. It's okay, I handed the wrong cup, don't mind it. In order to ease the atmosphere, Marlon took the initiative to get new tableware. When he came back, he found that the expensive dishes he ordered, New Zealand steak, truffle, and abalone ginseng soup, were all placed in front of him by Dora. Teacher Lee, why did you give me all these dishes? I forgot to tell you that I had already eaten my fill in the school cafeteria before leaving. These dishes were actually ordered for you, Dora said with a smile. Marlon was speechless. No, Mr. Lee, you have to eat something too. Really, no need. I've already eaten. If you don't eat, I won't eat either. Marlon crossed his arms, stubbornly sitting on the chair and staring at the ceiling. Okay, half and half, okay. Dora compromised. But the so-called half was obviously her intentional partiality. 2/3 of the steak, truffles, and abalone were piled in front of Marlon, leaving only a little for herself. Marlon didn't care and continued to eat with relish. The atmosphere at the dinner table gradually became relaxed, until Dora suddenly stopped, staring straight into the distance, her whole body frozen, as if struck by lightning. Teacher Lee, what's wrong with you? Marlon asked vaguely with his mouth full of food. Dora didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the stairs. Marlon frowned and followed her gaze, only to see a group of people coming down from the second floor, standing at the stairs and talking with smiles. Chapter 13, Provocation. Marlon looked at the group of people at the staircase in confusion. Some of them were foreigners, and some were Chinese. He turned his eyes to Dora and found that her expression was strange, as if she was related to that group of people. Teacher Lee, do you know them? Marlon asked in a low voice. Dora didn't respond, but her expression was gloomy and her eyes were complicated. Marlon's mind raced. Could it be an enemy? There's no way he could escape. Teacher Lee, how about I help you beat them up? Marlon suddenly said. Okay. Dora agreed subconsciously, then reacted and said in panic. Marlon, what are you talking about? Why are you hitting people? Don't be nervous, Teacher Lee. If it's really an enemy, just tell me, and I will definitely vent your anger for you. Marlon said seriously. Dora took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions. Let's eat. Stop making trouble. At this moment, a young man in a white suit among the group of people glanced at Dora. His face changed, and then he sneered. After saying a few words to the person next to him, he walked over here. Marlon looked up and saw the man, tall and thin, feminine, with a cold look in his eyes, followed by a woman wearing heavy makeup who looked a bit seductive. What was even more interesting was that the group of people stood not far away, seemingly waiting to see the show. Hey, long time no see, the young man said sarcastically. Marlon knew without thinking that he was not talking to him, so he stretched out his greasy hand, grasped the young man's hand, and shook it vigorously. Yeah, long time no see. Guzzy. You. The young man was stunned, his face suddenly full of embarrassment. Who the hell are you? Let me go. Hey, Ergu, stop pretending. Have you forgotten the times when we were kids, catching frogs together and peeking at Widow Lu taking a bath? Marlon's face was full of sincerity, and he spoke more and more outrageously. In the end, he patted the young man's shoulder. and the oil stains went directly onto his white suit. The young man was so angry that his face turned green. "I'll kick you to death." As he said that, he suddenly raised his leg and kicked Marlon hard in the lower abdomen. The kick was incredibly powerful, and it was obvious that he had used a ruthless move. But Marlon snorted coldly, slightly turned sideways, and the wind from his kick passed by his clothes, and the kick missed. Bang! The young man lost his balance and hit the dining table heavily. The egg noodle soup splashed directly on his head, making him look extremely embarrassed. "Fuck, I'm gonna kill you today." The young man was completely furious and turned around to attack again. At this moment, Dora stood up and shouted, "Xiao Wenba, stop it. You are not allowed to hit my students." Xiao Wenba was stunned for a moment. Then his face darkened, and he stared at Dora with a sneer. "Dora, it seems that you are really desperate. You have actually ended up eating with this country bumpkin." Dora looked at him coldly, with hatred in her eyes, but she said nothing. Marlon was more certain in his heart. This guy is indeed Mr. Lee's enemy. Chapter 14, Dora S. Past. Dora S. life was once glorious, but she also fell into the abyss. She was a double master student at Harvard Business School, majoring in law and economic management, and attracted much attention. But her life trajectory was completely changed by one person, Xiao Bowen. While studying in the United States, Dora met Xiao Bowen at a friend's birthday party. The second-generation rich man fell in love with her at first sight and began to pursue her madly. Flowers, sports cars, and even 500 drones forming a "Marry Me" confession over the Harvard campus. Hundreds of spectators were invited to cheer on the scene. The way rich people pursue love is so simple and unpretentious. But Dora did not agree. Her goal was to complete her studies, and love had no appeal to her. However, an accident changed everything. On her way home late at night, she encountered four burly foreign men and was about to lose everything. Xiao Bowen arrived like a hero driving a heavy Harley and beat back the four men with his taekwondo skills, and was even shot for this. Dora later learned that this was a carefully planned hero-saving beauty drama, and the four strong men were actors hired by Xiao Bowen at a high price. The bullet was real. Even with many loopholes, Dora was still moved and finally accepted his pursuit. However, Xiao Bowen's true colors soon emerged. He was not just pursuing love, but coveting Dora as family background in her body. Was caught having an affair with the bridesmaid behind Dora's back. This scene made Dora completely devastated, and she decisively canceled the wedding, even though the price was to become the laughingstock of the whole school and even her circle of friends. She gathered herself together, left the United States, and returned home. But that experience left her with a permanent scar. A year passed in a flash, and when Xiao Bowen suddenly appeared in front of him, all the deep-buried anger and humiliation instantly surged into his heart. "Xiao Bowen, you scum! How dare you come here?" Dora shouted harshly, her tone revealing undisguised disgust. Xiao Bowen turned around, looked her up and down with cold and contemptuous eyes, licked his lips, and said provocatively, "Dora, your figure is really getting better and better. This year, without the comfort of a man, did you miss me? I almost succeeded at the beginning. Tut, what a pity." "Shut up." Dora was furious, her voice trembling. She couldn't believe that she had ever fallen in love with such a scumbag. Xiao Bowen did not hold back and continued to approach, his tone full of contempt. "Dora, what right do you have to challenge me now? Your old man is ill, and your Lee family's company is in danger and heavily in debt. I used to be afraid of your family's power and didn't dare to touch you, but now, in my eyes, you are just a plaything." As he spoke, Xiao Bowen approached closer and closer, his eyes full of undisguised desire. His arrogance and viciousness made Dora's hands and feet cold, but at this moment, a voice came from the side. "Hey, scumbag, stay away from her." Xiao Bowen turned around and saw Marlon standing up with a faint smile on his face, but his eyes were full of coldness and a hint of sharpness. "Who do you think you are? Get out of here!" Xiao Bowen cursed disdainfully. Marlon sneered, slowly approached, and said frivolously, "If you dare to touch my teacher, I will make you regret coming to this world." Xiao Bowen was stunned for a moment, then sneered. "You want to be a hero and save the beauty? Boy, you can't get involved in this matter. Get out of here." Marlon narrowed his eyes slightly, and his aura changed. "Then you try and see if I can afford to get involved, or if you can't afford to pay." Chapter 15, A Sinister Plan. Xiao Wenba was about to reach out to touch Dora, but Lu Xianxian behind him grabbed his arm. Lu Xianxian smiled charmingly, with a subtle annoyance hidden in the corner of her mouth. She called herself Xiao Wenba's girlfriend, but she knew that she was just a plaything that he could abandon at any time. Even so, she still clung to this thigh tightly because by following Xiao Wenba, she got several coveted luxury bags worth over $1 million. Although she was exhausted from lying in bed these days and even injured several times, she knew that Xiao Wenba's family background was far superior to those of her previous financial sponsors, and the longer she stayed, the more money she could earn. However, at this moment, Dora's appearance made her feel threatened. The beauty and temperament of that woman easily surpassed her by 10 streets. In order to keep her position, Lu Xianxian thought quickly and immediately came up with an idea. She pretended to be shy and approached Xiao Wenba, gently patted his chest, and said in a soft voice, "Wenba, don't be angry, I just think you used the wrong method. I have a plan that will definitely make her throw herself into your arms willingly." Xiao Wenba frowned at her and snorted, "Hurry up and tell me. Don't waste time." Lu Xianxian blinked, took out a small bottle of unmarked powder from her bag, handed it to Xiao Wenba, and whispered, "I brought this specially, just a little bit will make any woman want more from a man. You divert her attention. I'll put the medicine in her tea, and then you just wait for her to come to you." Xiao Wenba's eyes lit up, and he smiled meaningfully. "If you can get it done, the jade necklace will be yours." The two quickly reached a consensus and exchanged a knowing look. Xiao Wenba immediately put on an affectionate look and walked towards Dora. "Ziran, do you know? The person I love most in my life is you," he said affectionately. "I blocked the bullet for you back then, leaving this gunshot wound, which is the testimony of our love." As he spoke, he deliberately lifted up his trouser leg to reveal the gunshot wound. Dora looked at him coldly, with a hint of sarcasm on her lips. "Xiao Wenba, your gunshot wound is just a play you directed and acted yourself. Don't treat me as a fool." Xiao Wenba's expression froze instantly, and Lu Xianxian behind him was also stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting Dora to expose everything. The air around them suddenly became stagnant. "Enough," Dora said coldly. "Your tricks are disgusting. Get out of here." Her words were like a slap in the face, making Xiao Wenba's face turn blue. Marlin on the side finally stood up, holding a glass of water in his hand, and said with a smile, "Mr. Xiao, I heard that you like to play tricks. Why don't you drink some water to calm down?" He deliberately shook his hand and poured the whole glass of water on Xiao Wenba. Chapter 16, See-Through. Xiao Wenba's face froze. He didn't expect that his carefully woven lie would be exposed. Although he cursed Su Kai, this traitor, in his heart, but he quickly adjusted his expression and continued to pretend to be affectionate. "Ziran, you must have been misled by others. How could I joke about my own life? I was really injured because I was trying to save you that night." Dora smiled coldly, her tone calm, but with a hint of thorns. "Su Kai told me personally that he recreated the entire process of you bragging about directing and acting out the hero saving the beauty at the drinking table. Do you still want to quibble?" Xiao Wenba gritted his teeth secretly, and the smile on his face froze a little, but he quickly changed the subject and pretended to accidentally knock over Dora's water cup. "Oh, how careless," he sighed, his eyes dimmed. "Ziran, you don't believe me anymore, so everything between us, let's just end it like this. Has the drama been enough?" Marlin on the side couldn't bear to watch it anymore and complained in a low voice. Xiao Wenba didn't take it seriously and continued to pretend to be sad. "Ziran, how about this? Let's use tea instead of wine, drink a glass, and end this bad relationship completely. You won't even give me this face, right?" Dora frowned, always feeling that something was wrong, but thinking of Xiao Wenba's mention that the Xiao family might take action against the Li family, she nodded helplessly. "Okay, have a drink, but you'd better not play tricks." Xiao Wenba's eyes flashed with pride, and he immediately poured a cup of tea and handed it to Dora. At the same time, he picked up the red wine handed over by Lu Xianxian and clinked glasses with her. "Cheers." Just as Dora raised the teacup, Marlin suddenly reached out and snatched the cup away. "Marlin, what are you doing?" Dora frowned, not understanding why he suddenly intervened. Xiao Wenba could no longer hold back and shouted angrily, "You country bumpkin, do you know what you are doing? Are you trying to bring down the Lee family?" Marlin glanced at him, shook the teacup in his hand, and said with a smile, "Your name is Xiao Wenba, right? You acted well, but the method of drugging was too low level." "Drugging? What nonsense are you talking about?" Xiao Wenba turned pale and tried to cover it up, but his voice was trembling. "You still don't admit it?" Marlin sneered and handed the cup to him. "Since there's no problem, why don't you take a sip and try it?" I don't want to drink." "Why do you want me to drink?" Xiao Wenba quickly turned his head away, his eyes full of fear. Marlin turned his gaze to Lu Xianxian. If he doesn't drink, it's okay for you to drink, right? Lu Xianxian immediately shook her head and curled up into a ball. I'm not thirsty. Marlin sneered, raised the teacup and looked around at the two of them, and said sarcastically, "It's just a cup of jasmine tea. Are you so scared?" He then put the cup down, turned to look at Dora, his eyes full of silent questions. "Now, do you understand?" Dora's pupil shrank, and she finally realized the problem. Her face instantly turned cold as frost. "Xiao Wenba, you are really a scumbag." Chapter 17 Action. Dora looked at Xiao Wenba's reaction, combined with Marlin's words, and instantly understood everything. A cup of tea made Xiao Wenba so nervous. She was not a child, so she naturally guessed the general situation. Moreover, Marlin's reminder made her realize that this student was not being willful, but protecting himself. "Student Marlin, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you just now." Dora apologized in a low voice guiltily. Marlin waved his hand and pointed at Xiao Wenba. "Teacher Lee, it's okay. But now is not the time to apologize. You still have things to deal with." Following Marlin's gesture, Dora's eyes fell on Xiao Wenba's disgusting face again. She was so angry that she snatched the tea from Marlin's hand and poured it over him without hesitation. "You dare?" Xiao Wenba threatened, but a mouthful of tea was splashed on him. He quickly spat it out, holding his throat and retching, and only breathed a sigh of relief after making sure he hadn't swallowed the tea. He turned around and angrily scolded Lu Xianxian beside him. "What kind of bullshit plan did you come up with? You almost made me drink the medicine." After saying that, he slapped Lu Xianxian in the face with his backhand, and half of the makeup on her face fell off instantly. He was still furious, and he directed his anger at Dora. He raised his hand and roared at her. "You stinky bitch, you dare to splash water on me? I'm going to break your legs today." However, before he could get close to Dora, Marlin grabbed his wrist, and then, with a crack, Xiao Wenba's arm was fractured. Xiao Wenba was in excruciating pain, with beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. He fell to his knees and screamed, his face full of disbelief. "How dare you touch me? You're dead." At this time, the group of people brought by Xiao Wenba were stunned. They didn't expect that this ordinary-looking young man was so powerful. Soon, two middle-aged bodyguards rushed over. They were Ruan Ingwa and Ruan Ingjia, who were hired by the Xiao family at a high price and were very skilled. After checking Xiao Wenba's injuries, they confirmed that his arm was only fractured, but his face was still livid. "How dare you? How dare you hurt young Master Xiao? Do you know who his father is? Is he someone you can afford to offend?" Ruan Ingjia glared and threatened in a cold voice. Marlin narrowed his eyes slightly and observed the two men. Just from their steps and standing postures, he could tell that these two men were martial artists, and they were definitely not ordinary people. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, and excitement emerged in his heart. "It's been a long time since I met a decent opponent." Uncle Ingjia, stop talking nonsense. Break his legs first. My dad will take responsibility if anything happens." Xiao Wenba hugged his arms and yelled on the ground, his voice full of resentment. The two brothers looked at each other, snorted, and quickly rushed towards Marlin. Marlin stood there, his hands in his pockets, a long-lost desire for battle in his eyes, and whispered to himself, "Just in time, let's just warm up." Chapter 18 Kneeling. The two brothers, Ruan Ingjia and Ruan Ingwa, have worked closely together for many years. At this moment, they attack from behind and forward with fierce offensive. Ordinary people would be at a loss when seeing this. But Marlin just raised his eyelids, snorted coldly, with a hint of contempt at the corner of his mouth. Ruan Ingjia first punched Marlin in the face, but when the distance was less than half an inch, he suddenly retracted and quickly stepped aside, revealing Ruan Ingwa's figure. He had already accumulated enough strength and kicked straight to Marlin's crotch, as fast as lightning. "A kick that will cut off your progeny." Marlin cursed in his heart. What a despicable trick! But his face remained calm. He suddenly closed his legs and firmly clamped the other's ankle. "I'm quite capable." Ruan Ingwa was slightly surprised, but not panicked. He tapped the ground with his other foot, flipped in the air, and swept towards Marlin's face. Marlin was not in a hurry. He sneered and raised his knee, hitting the target directly. His knee hit Ruan Ingwa's crotch hard, knocking him away directly. He screamed, fell to the ground, and rubbed his lower body frantically, uttering a shrill wail. "How does it taste?" Marlin taunted. You have no moral integrity. You deserve to be punished for your own moves. Seeing his brother being knocked down, Ruanjie realized that Marlin was not easy to deal with. He took out a dagger, went around behind Marlin, and prepared to attack him, stabbing Marlin's back with the sharp blade. However, the dagger went straight through Marlin's body without any obstruction. Shadow! Ruanjie's eyes widened, his voice trembling. The next second, Marlin stood in front of him and smiled softly. Uncle, if you lose focus during a battle, you could get killed. Ruanjie's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and he attacked with the dagger again. This time, Marlin was too lazy to play tricks and raised his hand to slap him casually. Bang! The slap was so powerful that it sent Ruanjie flying. His body knocked over several tables, his mouth was full of blood, and 2 teeth were missing. He looked extremely embarrassed. Xiao Wenbao was shocked. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was wide open enough to fit 2 eggs. The Ruan brothers were masters hired by his father at a high price, but now Marlin easily dealt with them, like swatting mosquitoes. While Marlin was not paying attention, Xiao Wenbao quietly got up and prepared to slip away. As soon as he stood up, he heard a cold voice behind him. Stop! He turned back stiffly, only to see Marlin stepping on Ruanjie's crotch and said coldly, You have no martial ethics and have brought shame to the martial arts community. How is it? It feels good to have someone step on your crotch, right? Ruanjie rolled his eyes in pain and nodded, frantically begging for mercy. I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. When Xiao Wenbao saw this, his lower body felt cold and his teeth were trembling. Marlin retracted his foot, turned around, and walked in front of Xiao Wenbao, patted his face gently, and said lightly, Kneel down. Xiao Wenbao was so frightened that his legs went limp and he fell to his knees, shaking all over. Chapter 19, Compensation. Kneel down. I looked at Xiao Wenbao's expression, from dazed to shocked, and finally to furious. The whole process could be called a collection of emoticons. He probably thought I was going to hit him, but I just asked him to kneel down and apologize. This guy was dumbfounded, especially in front of so many friends and onlookers. Kneeling down to apologize was like a public execution for him. You know, he's the eldest son of the Xiao family, and his face is more important than his life. So, this guy put on a superior expression and said to me with an apologetic smile, You look shabby. Your family is not well off, right? It doesn't matter, I have money. I can give you money as an apology fee, okay? Okay? Not a damn thing. I sneered in my heart, but on the surface I remained calm. Seeing that I didn't respond, he actually started to raise the price. 1 million? 3 million? 5 million? No, 10 million, pay now. At this time, the onlookers were stunned. After all, someone threw 100 million on the spot without blinking an eye. But who am I, Marlin? Let alone 10 million. I wouldn't even care if it was 10 times as much. So, I coldly spat out 3 words, kneel down and apologize. Xiao Wenbao still wanted to be tough, but I gently squeezed his other intact arm, and the meaning was obvious. As expected, he gave in and nodded repeatedly with a crying voice. Okay, I kneel. The next second, he knelt down directly with a thump, and the posture was so neat. Don't kneel to me, kneel in front of my teacher. I pointed at Dora. My voice was cold, and my eyes were full of murderous intent. People like this deserve to kneel. Dora, like a dog, lowered his head and said, I'm sorry, I'm a bastard. I'm a beast, I will never bother you again. Please, let me go. After saying that, he squeezed out 2 tears, and it looked like a real story. Dora looked down at the man who had bullied and humiliated her, now kneeling at her feet, and her expression suddenly became relieved. Obviously, the shadow in her heart had disappeared. She breathed a sigh of relief, turned to me, and said, Thank you, Marlin. I'm fine. Let them go. I nodded, turned around, and said 2 words, Get lost. When Xiao Wenbao heard this, he got up in a panic as if he had been pardoned and ran out of the restaurant without even caring about Lu Xianxian. As for the others, they ran faster than rabbits. But the story doesn't end here. Seeing this group of people running faster than anyone else, I was just about to breathe a sigh of relief. But before I could turn around, Zheng Fanrong, the owner of the Xinyue Hotel, rushed in with a group of security guards, staring at Dora and me angrily. It's you who caused trouble here and smashed the store, right? Zheng Fanrong asked coldly. To be honest, I feel wronged. It was Xiao Wenbao who messed up the place. I was just an assistant, but now all the blame is on me. The boss looked aggressive and directly surrounded us with rubber sticks. I couldn't help but complain in my heart. What kind of thing is this? One wave of trouble has just subsided, and another wave of trouble has arisen. What god did I, Marlon, offend today? However, I am a reasonable person, so I tried to explain. Actually, we are responsible, but there is another group of people. I don't care. Zheng Fanrong interrupted me directly. The other group of people ran away. So you have to compensate for all the losses. Otherwise, you will go to jail. I almost rolled my eyes on the spot. Good man, this person doesn't even bother to listen to reason and only cares about money. But since I do have some responsibility, I will pay for it. So I touched the bank card in my pocket and said, okay, how much is the broken stuff? Let's calculate the total. After hearing this, Zheng Fanrong didn't waste any words and directly asked people to count the losses. Half an hour later, the bill came. Zheng Fanrong handed the bill to Dora, and I immediately understood what he meant. He looked down on me, Marlon, and thought I was so poor that I couldn't even afford a meal, let alone pay the bill. Dora took a look at the bill, and her brows knitted together. I leaned over to take a look, and my vision went dark. It says, total loss is 100 million. Oh my God! Is this restaurant decorated with gold? Who would believe that a fight would cost 100 million? Not to mention the restaurant. I can buy the whole building for you. This is obviously a scam. I sneered in my heart, but I was calm on the surface. Compensation? Sure, but I will get back this debt sooner or later. Chapter 20, Incoming Call. Marlon looked at the summaries of the losses in his notebook and realized that his vision was still too narrow. Among these losses, there is even compensation for customers' mental damages. 100,000 per person, 500,000 for the cleaners, which damaged the image of the Crescent Hotel, and 15 million frightened the seafood in the fish tank. The seafood will die without eating the food, causing the seafood meat to deteriorate, with a total loss of 3 million. What the hell is this? Marlon wanted to strangle the mercenary hall manager wearing glasses next to Zheng Fanrong. Do you still have any shame? Can you have some shame? You led people to count seriously for more than half an hour. And this is all you ordered? Student Marlon, I can't pay back this 100 million. Dora whispered in Marlon's ear. She didn't expect that taking Marlon out for a meal would lead to a debt of 100 million yuan. Who would take 100 million yuan out for a meal? Dora's father hadn't been ill before, and the Lee family's capital chain hadn't had problems. Dora could have easily taken out 100 million from the Lee family to pay it back. Now, the Lee family can hardly protect itself, let alone 100 million. It is difficult to withdraw even 10 million. After hearing what Dora said, Marlon was not worried. He could pay it back in just 1 second by swiping the card. But Marlon really didn't want to be trapped in such a miserable situation. He had to reason with Zheng Fanrong and convince him with logic. Or if that didn't work, he had to convince him with physics. Teacher Lee, don't worry. I'll go talk to the boss and bargain. I believe the boss is a reasonable person. Maybe he won't ask us for so much money. Just wait for me. Marlon patted Dora and comforted her. Then, he showed a sunny smile and walked in front of Zheng Fanrong. Boss, what's your name? Marlon said with a smile. Ever. Zheng Fanrong didn't understand what Marlon was going to do, but he still answered subconsciously. Oh, boss Zheng, could you please have a word with me? Marlon was still smiling. Humph. Zheng Fanrong snorted coldly. If you have anything to say, just say it here, okay? He didn't take Marlon seriously at all. Boss Zheng, how can you be like this? I have something important to tell you. Once I tell you, we can pay you back the 100 million right away. How about that? Marlon took a step forward and released his aura slightly, but only for a moment. Zheng Fanrong was shocked. Just now, he felt as if he was being stared at by a python and he might die at any time. Although it was only for a moment, cold sweat broke out on his back. Okay. Zheng Fanrong nodded and walked out of the crowd first, followed by Marlon. What do you want? Coming to a quiet corner where no one was around, Zheng Fanrong started to ask. Boss Zheng, wait a moment, I'll make a call. Marlon pressed his hand down towards Zheng Fanrong and then dialed the only phone number on his cell phone. Hey, Grandpa. The call was connected and Marlon spoke. What's the point of looking for his grandfather? Judging from the way this kid is dressed, his grandfather must be a farmer, right? Is he going to pay back 100 million yuan with a few boxes of local specialties? Ridiculous. Zheng Fanrong watched this coldly from the side. Marlon's grandfather, Su Qingtian, yawned casually on the other end of the phone, his voice hoarse and lazy. You little brat, you disturb my nap. Don't you know I will be very angry if someone disturbs my sleep? He said so, but he didn't mean to blame. After a while, Grandpa Marlon drank a sip of tea, regained consciousness, and said, What's the matter? Are you short of money? The Black Gold Supreme card I gave you has an unlimited limit. Impossible. You got beaten up. That's even more impossible. There are only a handful of people in the world who can beat you. Tell me what happened. Hiss, you won't break your vow, will you? Su Qingtian was guessing over there. Grandpa, don't guess blindly, this is what happened. Marlin told his grandfather what happened in a long speech. After hearing this, Su Qingtian was also very angry and cursed. There's such a thing? This is too much of a scam. 100 million yuan may not be a lot, but we can't stand this humiliation. What's the name of the restaurant you mentioned? Crescent Hotel, right? I'll remember it. I'll make a few calls and ask if our family has any shares in this restaurant. If there is, just fire the boss. If not, acquire the company and fire the boss. Wait a minute, grandson. This is intolerable. Su Qingtian could tolerate being punched openly by others, but he could not tolerate such a petty trick to disgust him. Marlin liked his grandfather's coolness. Just as he was about to hang up, he suddenly felt that there was one more thing he needed to say. Before hanging up the phone, he said, Grandpa, there is also the Leaf family in Linzhou. Please make some arrangements to protect the Leaf family from falling. Okay, little things? I'll remember them. Su Qingtian nodded on the other end of the phone, hung up, then changed his phone, made a few calls, and started making arrangements. Marlin and Zheng Fanrong stared at each other. Fuck, you called me here just to see you brag. Although Marlin didn't turn on the speakerphone, Zheng Fanrong still heard the general content, including something about firing him, which made him laugh out of anger. He had been the prosperous boss of the Crescent Hotel for nearly 10 years, and its performance had always been very good. If anyone wanted to fire him as the nominal boss, it would only be possible if more than 80% of the shareholders agreed in a vote. But this is simply impossible. The shareholders and shares of Crescent Hotel are very dispersed. Even if the largest shareholder agrees to fire him, the others will refuse because Zheng Fanrong can bring them benefits. This is why Zheng Fanrong is confident that he will not be fired. 30 seconds. Marlin looked at the timer on his phone and said calmly, In 30 seconds your phone will ring and you will be fired. Marlin knew that if his grandfather made a promise, he would fulfill it. If he said 1 minute, it would definitely not take more than 1 second. Get lost. Zheng Fanrong thought Marlin was an idiot and was about to ask the security to take Marlin back. Ding ling ling. His cell phone rang. 50 seconds. This time it's 10 seconds faster. Grandpa is getting more and more efficient. Marlin put his phone away, impressed by his grandfather's quick work. Zheng Fanrong was stunned and did not take out his phone immediately. He felt an ominous premonition rising in his heart. Boss Zheng, answer the phone quickly. Marlin pursed his lips and reminded. Marlin again. He's just an ordinary kid. What's there to be afraid of? Taking a deep breath, Zheng Fanrong took out his mobile phone and first looked at the caller ID on it. Zheng Fanrong laughed and felt relieved. He thought to himself that it was ridiculous that he was disturbed by Marlin. He was making a fuss out of nothing. The number displayed on the phone was not the phone number of a shareholder of the Crescent Hotel, but an unfamiliar number. Zheng Fanrong wanted to hang up the phone, but suddenly he wanted to tease Marlin. So he answered the phone, turned on the speakerphone, and let Marlin listen. He wanted Marlin to understand that in this world, there are always people better than you. And if you brag, you will be slapped in the face. Chapter 21, Crazy Share Sales. Zheng Fanrong, right? I'm letting you know that you're fired. From now on, you're no longer the boss of the Xinyue Hotel. Your wages for this month will be settled, and the liquidated damages you signed will also be deposited into your account. The termination information will be sent to you via email later, so please check. On the other end of the phone was a middle-aged man with a steady voice. He spoke slowly, but with an undisguised dignity. After the man finished speaking, he hung up the phone without waiting for Zheng Fanrong's response. For a small character like Zheng Fanrong, the fact that he took the time to call him was already a great respect for Zheng Fanrong. Zheng Fanrong was stunned at first when he heard the busy tone of his mobile phone, and then he burst into laughter and almost choked with laughter. When he had laughed enough, he rubbed his stomach, which was aching from laughing, and said to Marlin, I really didn't expect that you knew my phone number, and then you hired a scammer to call me. So this is your method, but you are still too naive. You don't understand the situation of our Crescent Hotel. The shares of the Crescent Hotel are dispersed. If you want to fire me as the boss, at least all shareholders must hold a meeting and half of them must agree. Even if they agree, the meeting alone will take several hours. Only 1 minute has passed. Who are you trying to fool? Boy, before you threaten others, please do some research and understand the business operations. Otherwise, you will be embarrassing yourself. Zheng Fanrong was on speakerphone just now. So Marlon heard everything that was said on the phone clearly and knew that his grandfather had gotten the job done. This Crescent Hotel already belongs to his Su family. At the very least, they should be the largest shareholder. Marlon looked calm. Boss Zheng, you're going to cry later. Go away. I will cry, and then you will cry. Think about how you are going to compensate the New Moon Hotel for the loss of 100 million yuan, right? Zheng Fanrong had a look of impatience on his face. He tilted his neck and was about to call the security guard, but then an email message came on his mobile phone. He glanced at it, and his mouth suddenly opened wide. He couldn't believe the content of the email. He glued his eyes to the phone and read the email message over and over again. This email was a letter of dismissal, dismissing Zheng Fanrong from his position as the owner of the Crescent Hotel. This did not surprise Zheng Fanrong. What surprised Zheng Fanrong was that the unit that sent the email was the Crescent Hotel Human Resources Management Center, which had hired him in the first place. This is an official email. How is it possible? How is it possible? Zheng Fanrong muttered to himself, and then he quickly made a phone call. His cell phone contained the phone numbers of almost all the shareholders of the Crescent Hotel. He hit them one by one. Hey, Brother Lee, why did the Human Resources Management Center send me a dismissal notice? Is there something wrong with the system there? Is it sent by mistake? Can you tell me what's going on? The Brother Lee he called owned 8% of the shares of Linzhou Crescent Hotel, which was already a lot. Boom. I knew you would call me, but don't ask me. I don't know what's going on. I don't have any shares anymore, and I'm no longer a shareholder of the Crescent Hotel. Brother Lee said that he had lost his shares, but his tone was not sad, but excited. Brother Lee, how could that be? Why aren't you a shareholder anymore? Zheng Fanrong was puzzled. He then thought of a possibility and asked again without daring to question. Brother Lee, could it be that you sold your shares to someone else? Yes. Brother Lee answered briskly, confirming Zheng Fanrong's guess. You are confused, Brother Lee. Don't you know that the shares of the Crescent Hotel are on the rise? As long as you hold them, they will continue to appreciate in value, and your net worth will also continue to rise. You can't sell them no matter how much money you pay. Zheng Fanrong wanted to curse this shareholder Brother Lee for being stupid. The business of Xinyue Hotel is booming now. As long as you hold shares, you can get 8% of the annual dividends, which is nearly 100 million yuan. This means that you can get 100 million yuan by lying at home and doing nothing. Brother Lee actually bought the shares. If he isn't a fool, then what is he? Fanrong, you have a narrow mindset. Shares are important, and I can get dividends every year. I originally thought that I would never sell them in my lifetime, but Brother Lee paused for a moment, and his tone became excited. But you don't know, that person asked for 8 billion. 8 billion? A price that I can't even imagine. You said 8 billion to buy 8% of the shares of Crescent Hotel? If you were me, would you sell it? What? 8 billion. It was as if a bolt of lightning exploded in Zheng Fanrong's head. The 8 billion were like 80 rockets bombarding his mind one after another. 8 billion. He knew what this meant. This is 10 times the market value of the 8% stake in Crescent Hotel. If these 8% of shares were put on the trading market, the price would only be 800 million. It's a very simple truth. No matter how good the situation is, these shares are still virtual overall. No matter how well the Crescent Hotel develops, it still has to distribute dividends every year. At 100 million yuan per year. Even if there is growth in the future, under normal circumstances, it will take nearly 5 years to get 800 million yuan. What's more, business itself has many uncertainties. Maybe if a 6-star hotel opens in Linzhou next year, the turnover of Xinyue Hotel will drop by half. Or if there is a food crisis, Xinyue Hotel will go bankrupt directly. Then not only will the shares in your hands be useless, but you will also be involved in debt. Brother Lee saw Zheng Fanrong's long silence and took the initiative to speak. Prosperity. I believe you must be shocked too. 8 billion. This is real money, not something like shares. It was deposited into my account in 1 second. With these 8 billion, I don't have to worry about anything in my life. Okay, I'm taking a hot spring bath now. I won't say any more. I'm going to Hawaii in a few days to buy a beachfront villa, and I'm going to retire there. I'm dead. I'm dead. Ha ha ha. Brother Lee hung up the phone with a smile. Zheng Fanrong didn't understand why the world had suddenly become so crazy. 8 billion. Was this the kind of money that ordinary people could easily pay? Did they take the money lightly? Zheng Fanrong wanted to get more details and called a few shareholders. The result was the same. Those shareholders all bought the shares. Even those who originally wanted to pass the shares on to the next generation as heirlooms did not hesitate. The reason was simple. They wanted to refuse, but the offer was too much, so much that they were simply too embarrassed to say no. Some people sold at 10 times the market price. Some people disagreed and asked for 20 times. What? Still disagree? 30 times? Still disagree? 50 times? They kept raising the price until the other party was exhausted. After Zheng Fanrong called all the shareholders, he found out that they had all sold their shares. Finally, Zheng Fanrong found a person who sold information in the stock industry and found out that all the shares were transferred to one person. The full name of that person could not be found. Only one piece of information was known. That person's surname was Su. Chapter 22, Let Go. Last name Su? Su. Zheng Fanrong's body trembled for a while. He turned his neck stiffly and looked at Marlin, who was picking his nose. He just heard Dora call the young man Marlin. Marlin, last name Su. Thinking about what Marlin had just said about firing him, he understood, completely understood. All this was done by the unsophisticated young man next to him, whom he looked down upon. Just now, I wanted to humiliate him. I laughed at him. I didn't take him seriously. It's really, really ridiculous. Zheng Fanrong put on the most flattering smile of his life and walked up to Marlin with his head bowed. Marlon? No. Master Su, Grandpa Su, did you do all this? Marlin, who was waiting bored, finally waited until Zheng Fanrong finished his call and came to his senses to talk to him. He wiped his nose-picking fingers on Zheng Fanrong's clothes, raised his eyebrows, and smiled. Boss Zheng, you just realized it now? This sentence is an admission. Zheng Fanrong became even more humble and grinned. I'm so stupid that I didn't even realize that Grandpa Su's family background is unparalleled in the world. My dog eyes are too short-sighted. Don't say so much useless things. We owe you 100 million yuan. Should we return it to you now? Marlin asked back. Then he suddenly realized, oh, I forgot. You are not the boss anymore. You can't make the decision. I shouldn't have asked you. That's fine. I'll go back and call someone else to take charge. Zheng Fanrong was as sad as if he had lost his parents. He grabbed the corner of Marlin's clothes tightly as he was about to leave. 2 tears appeared on his slightly fat, old face. He cried sadly. Grandpa Su, don't go yet. Please spare me this time. Let me continue to be the owner of the Crescent Hotel. I've been an orphan since I was a child. I begged for food and worked hard in Linzhou. After 30 years of struggle, I finally became the owner of the Crescent Hotel. It's not easy for me. Grandpa Su, please have mercy on me and don't fire me. I can create profits for the Crescent Hotel. I know I was wrong and I will never dare to cheat anyone again. Marlin didn't want to pay attention to him, so he broke free from Zheng Fanrong's hand and tried to leave. He heard Zheng Fanrong crying and shouting behind him. Please, Grandpa Su, I'm kneeling down for you. Upon hearing this, Marlin quickly turned around and supported Zheng Fanrong before he knelt down. Dora and the security guards over there were looking at this side. Although they couldn't hear what was said here, they could see it. If Su Yingxue saw the boss of the Crescent Hotel kneeling down to her, I don't think I could explain it clearly. Marlin snorted coldly. Stand still. How can a grown man kneel down so easily? Zheng Fanrong thought that Marlin had forgiven him, and he cried for joy. He cried even harder and thought to himself that people from aristocratic families are different. Even though I offended him, he still left me enough dignity. In comparison, I was really too narrow-minded before. I must learn from Grandpa Su. Thinking of this, Zheng Fanrong wiped his tears with his palm, and this time he said sincerely, Grandpa Su, have you forgiven me? Don't call me Grandpa Su. Am I an old man? Do you have the nerve to say that? Just call me Marlin. I don't want people around me to know my identity. Marlin was helpless. Being called Grandpa Su by a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s, he got goosebumps every time he was called that. Okay. When there are few people around, I will call you Su Xiao, and when there are many people around, I will call you Marlin. Zheng Fanrong nodded frantically. As for your dismissal, I will not revoke it, Marlin said after thinking for a while. Zheng Fanrong was confused. Didn't he forgive me? Why didn't he cancel it? Marlin saw Zheng Fanrong like this and smiled faintly. Don't act so surprised. You are an old fox. Who can tell whether the words you say or the promises you make are true or not? I will give you an observation period of half a year. If you don't do such wicked things as cheating customers during this period, you will still be the owner of the Crescent Hotel. Of course, your 6-month observation period will not be in vain. As long as you maintain the profit of the Crescent Hotel, Your salary and bonus will remain the same. How do you think? Zheng Fanrong put away the fawning smile on his face. Marlin was right. Those who could make it to the level of the Crescent Hotel were all old foxes. His crying just now was indeed an act. Master Su, I agree. I will work hard, obey the law, and never cheat anyone again. Zheng Fanrong knew that this was almost the best outcome, and if he disagreed, he would have to pack up and leave. Okay, call the person who called you when you first arrived, and I'll tell him. Marlin pointed at the phone in Zheng Fanhong's hand. Zheng Fanrong dialed the unfamiliar phone number without hesitation. The first time I called, the phone rang more than 10 times, but no one answered. The second time I called, the other party hung up. The third time, after 2 rings, the call was finally connected. Zheng Fanrong quickly handed the phone to Marlin. Marlin put the phone to his ear. Suddenly, the impatient voice of the majestic middle-aged man came from the other end of the phone. What do you want to do? I've made a decision, and I won't change it. Don't call me again, or I'll find someone to go. It's me, Uncle Xiang. Marlin interrupted the middle-aged man before he could finish his words. The middle-aged man immediately shut up. His impatience disappeared. He recognized Marlin's voice and said happily, "It's Chunqing, you're next to him?" "Yeah, that's right. What is Uncle Xiang doing now? Is your injury okay?" Marlin also greeted him with a smile. He had a good relationship with Uncle Xiang, and he learned a lot of business knowledge from Uncle Xiang. I am now on the New York Stock Exchange, preparing to list several subsidiaries with trillions of dollars in assets. Thanks to you, my business can go further. Since you treated my injuries, they have completely healed. Now I feel as strong as a young man in his 20s, and I don't feel tired even when I work for more than 10 hours a day. Uncle Xiang spoke very quickly, as if he was busy with other things. Marlin felt that he couldn't disturb Uncle Xiang, who was busy every day, without any rest time, so he quickly got to the point. "Uncle Xiang, I will give Zheng Fanrong a 6-month observation period. I won't revoke his position as the owner of the Crescent Hotel." "Okay, you don't need to tell me about this kind of trivial matter. You can make the decision yourself. By the way, you're in Linzhou, right? I'll give you Xiao Lu's phone number. He is the top official in Linzhou. If you encounter any problems, you can call him. He can usually solve most of the problems." "Okay, got it." Marlin nodded. Uncle Xiang didn't have time for much small talk and soon hung up the phone. "Okay, it's done. You are now just the acting boss of the Crescent Hotel. Wait for half a year and see how you perform. Let's go." Marlin threw Zheng Fanhong's cell phone to him and turned to walk towards Dora. Chapter 23, 5 Organ Strengthening Pills. Zheng Fanhong followed Marlin. The two returned to Dora. "Marlin, what did you say to him? Why are there tear marks on the boss's face? Did he cry?" Marlin came to Dora, and before he could say anything, Dora asked curiously. Marlin touched his chin, unable to think of a suitable reason, so he made up a story. "I just explained the truth to him, starting with the traditional virtues of the Chinese nation for 5,000 years, and then talking about the importance of being upright, honest, and trustworthy. Mr. Zheng has never been to school and has never heard of so many great truths, so he was shocked. I felt that I had done a terrible job before, and I suddenly realized my mistake and started crying with regret. I couldn't stop her from crying. Dora was stunned and half believing and half doubting. The boss, a grown man, cried because of this? I don't know. Maybe it's my personal charm that's causing the problem again? Marlin said narcissistically, and then quickly diverted Dora's attention and said. The boss agreed and said that we don't have to pay 100 million yuan, but only 10,000 yuan. Marlin deliberately raised his voice and pronounced the words 100 million and 10,000 very heavily, deliberately letting Zheng Fanrong hear it. 10,000. I'll pay 10,000. Dora was in disbelief. $10,000, what a joke. This $10,000 was not even enough to cover the cost of a casual meal at the Crescent Hotel. Zheng Fanrong appeared at the right time. He coughed twice, cleared his throat, and said loudly, Sue, Brother Marlin is right. I only want 10,000 yuan. Just now, I did have the bad intention of cheating you too, but this brother's words convinced me. I decided not to cheat anyone again. You pay 10,000 and I'll make up the rest. I won't let the Crescent Hotel suffer any losses, so you can leave without worry. The second half of this sentence was addressed to Marlin, to show his attitude towards running the Crescent Hotel. This. Doris still couldn't believe it. Come on, Mr. Lee, just pay the 10,000 yuan. We've been out for such a long time, and we're almost late for the afternoon class. We need to go back quickly after paying the money. Marlin patted Dora. All right. Dora nodded and took out her phone to pay the bill. Although I don't understand how I got such luck that 100 million turned into 10,000, but of course I am happy that I can pay less. Marlon packed up the unfinished food and wanted to eat it right away, but he had wasted too much time and it was almost too late for the afternoon class, so he had no time to eat. After leaving the Crescent Hotel, Marlon got into Dora's car and the two rushed back to school. In the car, Dora reminded Marlon while driving, "Student Marlon, you beat up Xiao Wenba today. Although I am happy to see this playboy get a lesson, Xiao Wenba is a mean-spirited person who holds a grudge. I think he wants to take revenge on you. Stay out of school recently." Inside the school, Xiao Wenba doesn't dare to take action. "After a while, when my family gets through it, we can protect you. If not, well, try not to leave the school during your 4 years in college." Marlon saw Dora talking about her family. Her expression was gloomy. There was a kind of desolate beauty on her beautiful face, and he felt distressed and asked curiously, "Teacher Lee, what's wrong with your family?" Dora didn't want to say it at first, but seeing Marlon's sincere and concerned look, she still told him about the troubles the Lee family had encountered. Generally speaking, the root cause of the Lee family's troubles was that Dora's father, Lee Shangjuan, had encountered serious health problems. His body became weaker and weaker. He started out with a constant cough, but now he is in critical condition. It has only been 2 months. Marlon asked Li Shangjuan about his symptoms in more detail and roughly determined that Li Shangjuan's condition was a problem with his internal organs. Marlon was able to diagnose the condition was because he had studied medicine and believed that his medical skills were not inferior to his physical fitness. His medical skills were not taught by his grandfather, but by an old man who was a close friend of his grandfather and also lived in the mountains. Later, Marlon learned that the old man was respected in the medical community as the miracle doctor. As you can tell from the name, this old man's medical skills are absolutely amazing. Once, Marlon followed his grandfather to visit the miracle doctor. As a result, when Marlon was having fun and casually divided a pile of medicinal herbs into several piles according to their different smells, the miracle doctor's eyes lit up. He took a liking to Marlon, took Marlon his hand, and said that Marlon was a medical genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years, and it would be against the will of heaven if he did not study medicine. From then on, Marlon had 2 masters. One was his grandfather, and the other was a miracle doctor. During every winter and summer vacation, Marlon would run back and forth between his grandfather's place and the miracle doctor's place, and was exhausted like a dog. Fortunately, Marlon has an excellent memory and strong learning ability, so he can take care of both. "Teacher Lee, I have a pill that I made myself to strengthen the 5 internal organs. You can take it back and give it to your father. I think it should have some effect." Marlon took out a dark pill the size of a quail egg from the medicine bag in his inner pocket. Carrying medicine bags with him was a habit he developed after studying medicine. Because once, when he was rescuing someone, he found that he did not bring a first aid kit, which led to the death of the person. That person was very important to him, and this incident made him blame himself for a long time, and it is still a thorn in his heart. Dora drove with one hand and took the pill given by Marlon with the other hand. She put it to the tip of her nose and smelled it. Although the black pill did not look very good, it had a strong medicinal fragrance, which was very pleasant and made Dora want to swallow it in one gulp. "Student Marlon, you can also make pills? So amazing," Dora asked as she sniffed. Marlon scratched his head, pretending to be a good kid flattered by the compliment, and made up an excuse. "When I was a child, my family was poor. Whenever I felt uncomfortable in my stomach, I would use the method taught by an old barefoot doctor in the village to make these 5 internal organ strengthening pills. After taking them, the effect was very good, which was better than going to a big hospital for an 4 drip." Dora smiled and thought Marlon was very thoughtful, so she put the pill away casually. As for whether to give it to her father, she didn't care at all. He didn't believe that a black-looking pill would be useful for a disease that modern medicine couldn't cure. Just think that Marlon was using the pill to amuse her. Dora's BMW X6 drove into the campus. At this time, there were only 10 minutes left in the class. Dora didn't have any classes in the afternoon, so she wasn't too anxious. Marlon said goodbye to Dora and ran to the university classroom with his packed box. Because he ran too fast and packed too much, some vegetable soup spilled from the packing box on the way. Marlon was in a hurry to go to class and didn't care about it. After rushing for a long time, I finally arrived at the classroom 1 minute before class started. Chapter 24, I'm Not Late. This class is about stock market analysis. It is taught by an old teacher in his 50s named Wei Chonglin. He is about 1.5 meters tall, slightly bald, and wears a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He always looks serious in front of students. Students are usually present a few minutes before a university class, but the teacher usually does not start the class according to the exact time. He or she will start the lecture when he or she feels that most students have arrived. Seeing that the seats were almost full, Wei Chonglin pushed his gold-rimmed glasses, took a sip of tea, cleared his throat, turned on the PPT courseware on the projector, and knocked on the podium table. Bang, bang. The sound of knocking on the table quieted the noisy classroom. The students of Class 6 of Business Talent also knew that Wei Chonglin was about to give a lecture. They turned to Wei Chonglin and began to prepare for the lecture. No one dared to play with their mobile phones. This is the result of Wei Chonglin's usual rigid and serious personality. If it were any other gentle teacher, most students would just lower their heads and play with their mobile phones. Because this is a university, unlike high school, university teachers generally don't pay much attention to students. When I was in high school, the teachers would say to the hopelessly poor students, "You can sleep, but don't snore and disturb other students who want to study." When I got to university, this sentence was extended to, "You cannot attend classes, you can play with your phone, but don't turn on the external speakers and disturb the students sleeping next to you." But Wei Chonglin is an exception. He used to be a high school principal. Perhaps it was this identity that made him always require students to follow the rules of the high school. No playing with mobile phones in class. Otherwise, their phones will be confiscated if found. And no sleeping. Otherwise, they will fail the course at the end of the semester. Seeing the students sitting upright and obediently, Wei Chonglin found the feeling of high school teaching. He felt very comfortable and began to lecture according to the PPT on the courseware. It's called a lecture, but in fact, it's just reading from a PPT. This PPT is an old one from a few years ago. The market analysis of many stocks is outdated, and a lot of the data has no reference value. But Wei Chonglin continued speaking. He read very enthusiastically, and he felt that he spoke with great emotion, and sweat broke out on his forehead. Inwardly, I praised myself for being a teacher who taught diligently and won provincial honors. I was unlike those young teachers who mingled with students and laughed all day long. It was so unbecoming, and they had lost all the dignity of a teacher. Report. When Wei Chonglin was concentrating on his meditation, a voice was heard at the door. Wei Chonglin was very annoyed after being interrupted all of a sudden. He hated it most when someone interrupted him when he was reading a PPT courseware, because the next time he read it, he couldn't find where he had read last time, and he had to ask the students again, which made him seem very unprofessional. Wei Chonglin frowned, raised his slightly bald head, and looked towards the door. I saw a student in tattered clothes standing at the door, holding up a military salute with a very symbolic meaning, and the one shouting report was him. The other hand that did not salute was holding a pile of plastic bags and packing boxes, with oil dripping from the bottom. Marlon, who had just said goodbye to Dora, and rushed to class anxiously. Marlon looked at Wei Chonglin and thought, "This teacher is so dedicated. He hasn't even started class yet, but he's sweating on his forehead from teaching." After a closer look, through the look in the look, smell, ask, and feel method of traditional Chinese medicine, Marlon discovered that Wei Chonglin had sweat on his forehead due to kidney deficiency, and it had nothing to do with his seriousness in teaching. "Oh, I take back the word dedicated." Marlon thought about it in his mind, but his face remained expressionless, and he did not say it out loud because Marlon felt that he still had to respect the teacher. "Humph." Wei Chonglin snorted coldly as he came up without saying a word. Being late for his class was simply a challenge to his authority. Looking at the boys' clothes at the door, which looked like cheap goods, Wei Chonglin concluded that Marlon was just an ordinary student from a humble family. This made him more confident in killing the chicken to scare the monkey. Wei Chonglin saw that Marlon looked unfamiliar, and being cautious, he was afraid that he might have mistaken him for someone else. So he habitually pushed his gold-rimmed glasses and asked a question. "Are you a student in Class 6 of the Business Talent Program?" "Yes, sir." Marlon lowered his salute and nodded. "Yes, that's it." Wei Chonglin's face darkened, and he said in a deep voice, "As a student, do you have any sense of time? As a teacher, even though I'm old, I know to come to class a few minutes early. As a student, what qualifications do you have to be late? How can you be late? Your parents spent a lot of money to send you to such a good school, and you still dare to be late. Think about how hard your parents work to earn money. Do you have a conscience? Ah, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Besides, blah blah," he said a lot of things. This set of rhetoric was practiced by Wei Chonglin when he was the principal of high school. Anyway, every time he went to check classes and encountered a student who was late, he would, in his capacity as the principal, confront the student with this set of rhetoric without thinking twice. After each scolding, the student would tearfully say that he was wrong, that he was sorry to his parents, and that he would definitely study hard. Then, Wei Chonglin would sternly reprimand the student and ask him to go back. If there are students who are not moved by this set of rhetoric and do not shed tears, then humph. Sorry, no matter what your parents are doing, come to school immediately. Only when the student cries and says he is wrong will Wei Chonglin let him go back. Marlin frowned. He also went to high school, and he had heard this argument before. How did high schools across the country achieve unification? However, Marlin usually just listened to others being scolded. Since he was only late for half the class, the teacher would let Marlin in with a smile. There's no other reason. This set of excuses is really useless to Marlin. When it comes to grades, Marlin is always the top student in the grade, with a lead of more than 100 points over the second place. When it comes to family background, Marlin and his parents fly a helicopter to spray pesticides on the crops. Does this count as being rich? If not, I'm sorry, Marlin's family paid for the construction of that high school. It was in that remote area that Marlin was able to attend a high school, and as a result, too much investment was made, and it became one of the best high schools in the county. I just didn't expect that after leaving high school, I would hear this familiar muttering again. Marlin was indifferent. He even felt a little amused and raised the corners of his mouth. Bang! Wei Chonglin saw Marlin Jiangran smile, and he used all his strength to slap the table hard. You dare to laugh, be late for class, and even dare to slander the teacher. This semester's stock market analysis course, your usual performance score is 0, and you have failed the course. Wei Chonglin was so furious that his eyes slid down his face with excitement. When the students in the class saw this scene, some laughed, some sympathized, etc. Their attitudes varied. Rex, Samu, Marks, Lily, and other people who had grudges against Marlin were so happy to see Marlin finally get defeated that they almost banged their hands on the table to cheer for Wei Chonglin, whom they also hated. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Teacher, I'm not late. Marlin was speechless. He could only point to the clock in the classroom and said, My grandfather asked me to come to school. I don't want to fail the exam. Otherwise, my grandfather will scold me when I go back. Chapter 25, Eating Secretly. When Wei Chonglin heard that Marlin dared to quibble, he pointed at Marlin. What do you mean you're not late? How many minutes have you been in class? I can't teach a student like you. You're not allowed to come in. Get out. Marlin frowned. Why was the teacher so indiscriminate? So he pointed to the clock in the classroom again. Teacher, look, it's 1:59 now, and there's still 1 minute until the class starts at 2 o'clock. So, I'm not late. Wei Chonglin didn't believe Marlin's words. You're talking nonsense. He cursed and turned around to look at the clock, and his voice stopped abruptly. He discovered that the hour and minute hands of the clock were indeed pointing to 1:59. How is that possible? I remember that I taught for a long time. Wei Chonglin thought the clock was broken, so he looked at his mobile phone screen, which also showed 1:59. Suddenly, Wei Chonglin felt a little slapped in the face. He had just vowed that Marlin was late and would make Marlin fail the course. As a result, according to the school's rule of having classes at 2 o'clock, Marlin was not late at all. Although most students arrive at class a few minutes early, this is just a recommendation. In front of so many students, Wei Chonglin, who always valued his dignity, would never let himself be at a disadvantage. He gritted his teeth and tried to lecture Marlin verbally. As a result, I looked up. I found that Marlin had walked into the classroom consciously and sat down in his seat calmly, as if he was ready to listen to the class. Wei Chonglin suddenly felt as if he had punched something like cotton. He had never seen a student as indifferent as Marlin, who dared to ignore him like this. But he couldn't say anything more. After all, Marlin wasn't late and had already sat down in his seat. If he continued to nag, he would seem petty. Although he is such a person, he cannot show it in front of his students. Wei Chonglin cleared his throat again, took a sip of hot tea, calmed himself down, and pretended nothing had happened. He cursed Marlin in his heart and continued to read the PPT courseware. At this time, Marlin was sitting in his seat, wanting to listen carefully to what he was learning about stock market analysis. As a result, as I listened, I realized what Wei Chonglin was talking about. It was dull, tedious, and uninteresting. Moreover, Wei Chonglin kept his head down and did not look up. He kept muttering to himself. After a long time, he raised his head. With his small eyes through his gold-rimmed glasses, he noticed that a student was listening in a daze, and then he threw a piece of chalk at him. Marlin looked around the class and found that half of the students were drooping. They were not allowed to play with their cell phones. These college students who stayed up late at night could not stand the boring class content. Marlin was also infected by the atmosphere. He yawned loudly, stretched, and looked at the scenery outside the window boredly. Suddenly, his nostrils twitched, and he smelled a fragrance. Looking down, I saw that it was the food I had just brought back from the Crescent Hotel. Marlon licked his lips. He was a big eater, and he hadn't eaten enough at noon. He immediately felt his saliva flowing, and his appetite increased. Looking at Wei Chonglin, who was concentrating on reading the PPT courseware on the podium, Marlon thought that if he secretly took a few bites, no one would notice, right? Well, definitely not. I'll just eat 2 bites to satisfy my craving, and eat the rest after class. Thinking of this, Marlon quietly unpacked the package box at his feet. As a result, it was inconvenient to unpack the package on the ground while sitting on a chair. Marlon was so angry that he didn't even sit on the chair anymore. He squatted on the ground, put his head under the table, and concentrated on dealing with the takeaway box. Squatting down, Marlon found it much easier. He unwrapped the package in 2 or 3 moves, opened a box of egg fried rice, and then opened a few bites of fried potato shreds. He smelled them first, then closed his eyes, raised his head, and looked intoxicated. "It smells so good." Marlon couldn't help but whispered in admiration, but just as he finished speaking and opened his eyes, his face froze with intoxication. He found that a pretty face was looking at him with disgust. It was my desk mate, Jessica, the beauty in Class 6 of Business Talent. "Finished," Marlon screamed in his heart. "My image is completely ruined." He was so busy eating that he forgot about Jessica being around him. He didn't expect that he was caught by Jessica when he was secretly eating the food. In fact, Jessica's inner shock was just as great as Marlon's. She noticed Marlon from the moment he started reporting at the door, because Jessica was very interested in the superb tennis skills Marlon displayed in the tennis class this morning. "Don't you think this country-looking boy is not completely useless? At least he has strong athletic ability and can bring honor to his class." Moreover, Jessica also admired Marlon's neither humble nor arrogant attitude towards Wei Chonglin. Although she was a good student in the eyes of her teacher, she disliked Wei Chonglin from the bottom of her heart. There was no other reason. It was just that Wei Chonglin's lectures were too useless and boring. She came to Goen Jinshio Business School to learn about business management, so as to help her grandfather share the pressure. As a result, she was disappointed and angry because she couldn't learn anything from Wei Chonglin. Therefore, when she saw Wei Chonglin being humiliated, she was actually very happy in her heart. It can't be said that she had the temperament of a bad student, but that Wei Chonglin was really bad as a teacher. When they returned to their seats, Jessica discovered that Marlon had brought a lot of takeout boxes. She could see that a lot of the boxes contained leftovers. She wondered why Marlon brought these things, but she was not familiar with Marlon, so she could only pretend not to see it. However, while listening to the class, this guy Marlon crawled under the table, and I wonder what he was doing. Looked towards Marlon curiously and found that Marlon was enjoying the aroma of the food. That expression was as if he hadn't eaten for 800 years. Jessica saw that the takeout box contained only fried rice with egg and shredded potatoes. What was there to be excited about? Looking more closely, I found that the takeout box was labeled New Moon Hotel only. Jessica understood that these were brought back by Marlon from the Crescent Hotel, and Marlon did not look like someone who could consume at the Crescent Hotel. So, there are only 2 possibilities for the food in these takeout boxes. The first possibility: Marlon ran to the Crescent Hotel and shamelessly packed up other people's leftovers. The second possibility: Marlon pretended to be a takeaway delivery man and stole the takeaway prepared by the Crescent Hotel for other customers. There have been many such news reports recently. No wonder he was late. It turned out that he went to Shinyue Restaurant to steal someone's takeaway. Shinyue Restaurant was not close to the school. It was almost time for class when he came back and forth. He had no time to eat, so he brought it to the classroom to eat. Jessica is more inclined to the second possibility. Chapter 26: Apology. Shame. It's really shameful. Jessica couldn't understand how a shameless person like Marlon could appear in Class 6 of the Business Talent program. Fortunately, I had a new opinion of him just now. It turns out that I was wrong. People like him are hopeless, Jessica thought to herself, and the look of disgust on her face became more and more intense. Marlon doesn't want to face this face. Although this face is full of collagen and looks good no matter what expression it makes, Marlon wants to eat. He can't eat without any image in front of this beautiful face, right? How embarrassing. Seeing that Jessica didn't look away, Marlon could only whisper, You want to eat? I'll give you some." Jessica finally came to her senses. When she heard Marlon's question, she snorted coldly and thought to herself, "Who wants to eat the takeaway you stole?" "No." Jessica said coldly. Can't you eat after class? Do you have to eat during class? Marlon took a big mouthful of egg fried rice, chewed it twice, swallowed it, and said with a smile, I'm starving. There's no technical content in this class. I can't learn anything at all. I might as well take this opportunity to eat. Jessica agreed that Wei Chonglin's classes did not contain any technical content. She nodded, but then shook her head. How could she think that what a thief who stole takeout food said made sense? This is not in line with Jessica's style, and her face turned cold again. Then you can't eat in class either. The smell of food is terrible. Big sister, I'm really a little hungry. I can bear other things, but you put food in front of me, a foodie, and you don't let me eat. You might as well kill me. Marlon cried, Give me 2 minutes. The smell will be gone after I finish eating. After saying that, he simply stopped paying attention to Jessica and started eating. Jessica rolled her eyes in disdain. She had never seen such a person before. Seeing Marlon stuffing food into his mouth like a starving ghost, Jessica knew that she couldn't stop Marlon, so she turned her head away and ignored Marlon. After about a minute, Jessica felt that the class was too boring, so she carefully unscrewed the thermos cup with a cartoon pattern and took a sip of the brewed Yulamai milk tea inside. Suddenly, she heard a slight muffled coughing sound coming from under the table next to her, like someone choking. Then, before she could react, the cartoon thermos in her hand was snatched away by a dirty hand under the table next to her. Gurgle, gurgle. The hand just now was Marlon's hand. Marlon was indeed choked and drank up all the Yulamai milk tea in Jessica's thermos in one breath. Ah, it's so hot. After finishing the drink, Marlon realized that the milk tea in the thermos was very hot. Marlon was almost choking to death and didn't care about these things. When he reacted, he found 2 blisters on his lips. This was because his lips were thick. If it were someone else, their lips would have become sausage-shaped. Ah, you. Jessica was startled by Marlon's big hand. When she looked down, she found that Marlon had finished her Yulamai milk tea. The most important thing is that she also found that the edge of her favorite thermos cup was covered with grease stains when it was touched by Marlon's greasy mouth. You soiled my cup? Jessica's defense was broken instantly. Tears welled up in her eyes. You pay for it, no? You can't pay for it. This is what my mother bought for me. It's the only one in the world. You can't pay for it. I will kill you. Jessica was very emotional, and tears as big as soybeans flowed down her cheeks like water. This was a gift her mother gave her on her birthday before she ran away from home. After that birthday, her mother mysteriously disappeared without a trace. This cup was her only reminder of her mother. It was extremely precious to her, and she would not allow her roommates to touch it. But now it was defiled by Marlon so easily. She grabbed Marlon's collar tightly, shaking her hands wildly, as if she wanted to strangle Marlon. Ahem! Marlon coughed some more. This time, he wasn't choking, but Jessica grabbed his collar and shook him wildly, suffocating his neck and preventing him from breathing. Sister, stop shaking. Marlon waved his hands frantically. If you shake any more, I'll die. Who are you calling big sister? You used my thermos cup, drank the milk tea in it, and you still call me big sister? Jessica shook even more violently. Apologize to me. Jessica slowly let go of Marlon's collar until her arms became sore from shaking. Marlon stuck out his tongue and panted for a long time, then wiped the grease stains on the rim of the cartoon thermos cup with his sleeve and handed it to Jessica. My dear classmate, here you go. I've cleaned it for you. I'm really sorry for dirtying your cup. Can you please forgive me, please? Seeing Marlon wiping the rim of the thermos with his sleeve, Jessica was furious again, thinking that the thermos was defiled by Marlon again. I will never forgive you. You really make me mad. Humph! Jessica quickly took the thermos cup, looked at it with heartache, tears flashing in her eyes, thinking that she would go to the faucet to rinse the precious thermos cup 10 times, and then disinfect it with disinfectant. This thermos cup doesn't have to be so precious, even if your mother bought it for you. Why don't you just ask your mother to buy you another one? I'll pay for it. How much do you want? I'll give you twice as much. No, 5 times. Marlon felt bad when he saw Jessica's pitiful look. He poked his head out from under the table and comforted her sincerely. Wow, it would have been fine if Marlon didn't mention his mother, but as soon as he did, Jessica started crying again, sobbing. Ew, what do you know? This was the last birthday present my mother bought me before she passed away. My mother is gone, so where can I get her to buy me another one? Marlon was stunned and felt infinite sympathy for Jessica. Jessica said Mom is gone. She actually meant Mom ran away from home. However, what Marlon understood as "Mom is gone" was that Jessica's mother had passed away. This was obviously a distortion of the meaning of Jessica's words, but it was also Jessica's fault for not expressing it clearly. Marlon was most afraid of seeing girls cry, especially such a soft and beautiful girl. Once she cried, Marlon would be helpless. He could only keep repeating, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," beside Jessica, feeling extremely guilty for his rash behavior of soiling Jessica's mother's relics. Marlon was talking to Jessica, Wei Chonglin, who was reading a PPT enthusiastically at the podium, suddenly smelled a fragrance. He frowned, raised his head, sniffed and smelled. That's right. It was sent out from the class. If you dare to eat in my class, you dare not live, right? Chapter 27, Unlucky Paul. Wei Chonglin was furious when he thought that some students dared to eat in his class. He slammed the table and shouted, "Who? Who is eating in class? How dare you be so lawless? Be honest and stand up." His shout echoed throughout the classroom, startling the drowsy students and making them wake up a lot. After Wei Chonglin finished speaking, the classroom fell silent. However, Wei Chonglin waited for a long time, but no one stood up to admit their crime. Marlon was still under the table and hadn't come out yet. The moment he heard Wei Chonglin's words, he did not stand up, nor did he sneak out through the back door, nor did he try to deny it. Instead, he frantically shoveled the remaining food into his mouth. Because Marlon knew clearly that when Wei Chonglin found out that he was eating and discovered the leftovers in his takeout box, he would definitely ask him to throw the food away first, not to mention how he would blame him. For Marlon, that's not okay. Wasting food is a heinous crime, and it goes against Marlon's principles. Marlon won't allow himself to do that. Therefore, try to finish your meal before being exposed. No one admits it, right? Well, just wait for your class. I'll tell the dean after class that you no longer have the title of outstanding class this semester. Moreover, I will tell your counselor, Ms. Dora, about this matter. The selection of outstanding classes is linked to your teacher Dora's class management performance. Just wait for Ms. Dora to be criticized. Wei Chonglin became even angrier when he saw that no one admitted it. What he said was not just a threat to scare the students of Class 6 of Shangsai, but he would really do it. Dora about this matter when the time comes. Thinking of the guilty expression on the beautiful teacher Dora's face when she apologized to him after hearing about this matter, Wei Chonglin felt a sense of relief for no reason. "Teacher, I know who it is." As soon as Wei Chonglin finished speaking, Jessica raised her hand without hesitation. Don't. My good desk mate, the most beautiful girl in class. What are you doing?" Marlon screamed in his heart. He thought Jessica was going to report him because he broke her thermos. She was resentful. In fact, Marlon's guess was correct. Jessica did report him. In the next sentence, Jessica pointed under the table next to her and reported him. "Teacher, it was Marlon who was eating under the table. I tried to stop him and suggested that he eat after class, but he refused to listen and insisted on eating in class. If you want to blame someone, blame him alone. Don't involve Teacher Lee or tell the dean." Jessica reported Marlon because, on the one hand, she hated Marlon for dirtying her thermos cup, and on the other hand, she didn't want her counselor Dora to get into trouble. Of all the teachers, Dora was the best and most attentive to them, and she liked Dora the most. She didn't want her beloved teacher, Lee, to suffer any injustice. "Marlon, stand up. The culprit has been found," Wei Chonglin roared. Marlon had no choice but to crawl out from under the table and stand on his seat. Well, Marlon burped, and after much effort, he finally finished all the leftovers. There were still oil stains and rice on his mouth. Wei Chonglin looked at Marlon and thought, hey, what a coincidence. Isn't this the guy who was late just now? He's the one who eats during class. He is really hopeless. Without saying a word, Wei Chonglin picked up the blackboard eraser and smashed it directly into Marlon's face. Although the front of this blackboard eraser is made of cloth and cotton, the back is made of solid wood. It is quite large, and if you hit someone in the face with it, they won't be seriously injured, but if you get hit on the face, it will probably hurt for a long time. Wei Chonglin was taking the opportunity to take revenge. Just now, he was very upset about Marlon's lateness. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wanted to teach Marlon a lesson. Marlon was using paper to wipe the rice and oil stains from the corners of his mouth. He was surprised to see Wei Chonglin throwing a blackboard eraser at him. He also understood that this teacher must be taking the opportunity to take revenge because of what happened just now. However, this level of attack was too easy for Marlon to dodge. He just tilted his head slightly, and the blackboard eraser just brushed against Marlon's cheek and flew past. Marlon dodged the eraser very coolly. Then Marlon just dodged. Ah! Behind me, I heard a student crying. Marlon thought to himself, I was careless. I shouldn't have dodged and forgot there were people sitting in the back seat. The blackboard eraser flew to the back and must have hit some unlucky person. Marlon turned around and saw that the person hit by the blackboard eraser was Paul, one of Marlon's 3 roommates. The other 2 were Sumo and Marx. These 2 did not get along with Marlon. Moreover, these 2 were always hanging around with Rex and were Rex's lackeys. Paul is the only one in the class who can talk to Marlon. Last night, after a brief conversation with Paul, Marlon felt that Paul was a good person, but a little timid. This was also related to living in the same dormitory with Marx and Sumu for a long time, because those 2 people often bullied Paul for no reason. Over time, it was difficult for Paul not to be submissive. Paul, are you okay? If it had hit Rex and the others, Marlon would have thought it was no big deal. But when the eraser hit Paul, Marlon felt embarrassed. After all, it was also his own fault due to his carelessness. Brother Chinai, I'm fine. Marlon is a few months older than Paul. Last night, the 2 of them had a lively conversation. Paul felt that Marlon's personality was quite to his liking, so he enthusiastically called Marlon Brother Chun. However, although Paul said that he was fine, he kept rubbing his eyes with his hands. The blackboard eraser hit his eyes just now, and some chalk dust got into his eyes. Stop rubbing. Let me see. Marlon pulled Paul's hand away from rubbing his eyes and took a look. Paul's right eye was injured, and he kept crying because chalk dust got into his eye. His eye socket was also red and swollen, and there was a break in the skin because of the physical attack from the blackboard eraser. Marlon pried open Paul's eyelids and examined his eyeball. Fortunately, the eyeball was not injured, so Marlon breathed a sigh of relief. I'll take you to the school infirmary later. Don't rub your eyes too much to avoid infection. Marlon instructed Paul. Paul nodded. Marlon, are you still in the mood to care about others? Wei Chonglin slammed the table on the podium and said impatiently, Why are you eating in class? Are you a pig? Do you only know how to eat? This is a serious violation of class discipline, and you can be expelled. Do you believe it? It is indeed Wei Chonglin threatening Marlon. The mistake Marlon made was not serious. Wei Chonglin has no power or qualification to fire Marlon. This teacher attacked with a blackboard eraser, almost blinding Paul's eyes, and showed no intention of apologizing. Marlon felt a little disgusted, turned around, and looked at Wei Chonglin with cold eyes. Chapter 28 Betting. Marlon is a person who seldom gets angry because he knows that life is short and has seen many deaths. Therefore, his principle in life is short, enjoy life while you can. For him, getting angry affects his good mood and is not worth it. But now, Marlon was really unhappy and was made very unhappy by Wei Chonglin. It's not just because Wei Chonglin didn't apologize for hurting Paul, but also because he called Marlon a pig. This touched a thorn in Marlon's heart. When he was a child, he had a big appetite and ate more than others. The children around him didn't like to play with him. They said that only pigs that had cultivated into spirits could eat so much, and they were human beings and didn't play with pig spirits. During this period, Marlon was still very young and mentally immature, and was easily influenced by the attitudes of others. It was the loneliest and darkest period of his childhood. Marlon's cold eyes scared Wei Chonglin. Wei Chonglin felt his whole body trembling uncontrollably, and the chill spread from his tailbone along his back to the back of his head. Fuck! How could I be afraid of a little brat? He's just my student. What is there to be afraid of? Wei Chonglin cursed inwardly, shook his head, and forced himself to suppress the uncomfortable feeling, and said in a timid tone, Marlon, what are you looking at? As a student, you think it's reasonable for you to eat in class? What's that look in your eyes? You dare to glare at the teacher and disrespect the law. Marlon withdrew his cold gaze expressionlessly and said calmly, Teacher, your lectures are so boring. I feel like it's a waste of time. It would be better to use this time to eat. If you're blaming me for eating in class, why don't you reflect on why your lectures are so rubbish? Wei Chonglin felt that Marlon violated classroom discipline, and Marlon felt that Wei Chonglin was not fit to be a teacher. Since they had already fallen out, Marlon simply didn't give Wei Chonglin any face. As soon as these words came out, they were like a depth charge that exploded directly into the quiet class, causing a lot of discussion. Marlon is really brave. Everyone knows that the teacher's teaching level is really not good, but knowing it in your heart and saying it out loud are two different things. This guy is really brave. What tiger? I admire him for being brave enough to say it in front of Wei Chonglin. I am willing to call him Brother Chun, but I don't know if I will have the chance to see Marlin again in this school after this incident. I guess Marlin will most likely be expelled. Oh, I was too impulsive. How can a student fight with an old teacher? Even if he is not expelled, he will definitely be bullied in the future. In fact, most students felt that what Marlin said made sense, and what Marlin said was what they really wanted to say, because Wei Chonglin's class was so painful, but no one dared to say it out loud. Marlin was the first to try it as a warrior, but it certainly came at a price. Rex, Marx, and Sumo, the three of them covered their mouths and laughed kukuku. They were very happy. They had disliked this country bumpkin for a long time and were planning to teach Marlin a lesson today, but they didn't expect this to happen. They were excited at the thought of Marlin being expelled from school. Brother Chinyu, why do you say that? Don't argue with Wei Chonglin. If you admit your mistake and behave better, Wei Chonglin will definitely not be able to expel you, and Teacher Dora will also protect the students in our Business Talent Class 6. Paul poked Marlin on the back and said worriedly. He finally found a roommate he got along with and didn't want Marlin to be expelled. Marlin was about to turn around and respond to Paul, but Wei Chonglin was already furious. He took 2 steps at a time and came to Marlin, spitting, "How dare you say that I am not a good lecturer? Who do you think you are? You are just a student. I am an excellent teacher in the province and an associate professor at Goen Jinshio Business School. How can I be a bad lecturer and make up stories? I've decided that I will not let this go. I will report this to the school and request that you be expelled. This school, either you leave or I leave. I don't believe that I can't expel a student with low morals and no respect for elders. I can't have wasted all these years." Marlin used a layer of true energy to form a protective shield on his face to block Wei Chonglin's smelly saliva out. He didn't want to be contaminated by this stuff. Marlin curled his lips and felt helpless. If someone dared to talk nonsense to him like this outside the campus, in the martial arts world, or the organization he had been in for a year, he would just slap him away and subdue him with physics, simple and rough. But this was at school, so Marlin could only act and behave in a low-key manner. He could only resist the urge to slap Wei Chonglin's brains out and convince him with reason. "Teacher, how about making a bet?" Since he couldn't take action, Marlin had to settle for the next best thing and made a proposal to Wei Chonglin. "Bet." Wei Chonglin was stunned for a moment, wondering what Marlin was up to. "What bet?" he asked. Marlin pointed to the PPT courseware on the podium and said, "Teacher, I told you that you are not good at teaching, and you don't agree. How about I make a bet with you using the stock market analysis you taught?" Wei Chonglin was still confused and didn't quite understand. Marlin smiled and said, "It's a very simple bet. The teacher can ask me any questions about stock market analysis. If I can't answer one question, I lose. After I lose, I will voluntarily drop out of school. And if I answer all of the teacher's questions, I will ask the teacher some more questions about stock market analysis. If the teacher can answer one of them, it means I lose. This is already a huge advantage for the teacher. As an associate professor of stock market analysis, he wouldn't dare to accept the bet of a freshman like me, right? But if the teacher loses, please leave Goen Jinshio Business School and stop misleading students by teaching them stock market analysis." Marlin finished speaking. It caused a sensation in the class again. His deskmate Jessica was also dumbfounded. She looked up blankly at Marlin, who was so calm. She thought Marlin must be crazy to make such a bet. This bet is too disadvantageous to Marlin. If Wei Chonglin asks questions, Marlin needs to answer all of them correctly. If Marlin asks questions, Wei Chonglin only needs to guess one correctly. Marlin will have to voluntarily drop out of school. At this moment, Jessica felt a little guilty. She felt that she shouldn't have reported Marlin. Maybe the report just now had stimulated his brain, and he was reckless in his argument and just wanted to go all out. Jessica sighed, thinking that if Marlin was really expelled, she would also be responsible. She would then ask someone in the family to speak well of Marlin in front of the principal and protect Marlin from being expelled, which would be a kind of compensation to Marlin. Chapter 29 Answers. Okay. Wei Chonglin said yes 3 times in a row with a confident look on his face. "I'll take this bet. Don't deny it when the time comes. There are so many people in the class watching us." Marlin proposed the bet. Wei Chonglin hadn't reacted yet, but when he heard the content of the bet, he knew that he would definitely win. He sneered at Marlin's arrogance and ignorance in his heart and agreed. "Okay." Marlin nodded, looked around at the students in the class, and said with a smile, "I would like to invite all the students to be witnesses. Thank you all here." After the classmates were shocked, The rest were excited by Marlon's bet, who hasn't fantasized about competing with the teacher when they were in school, but their strength didn't allow it. They are students too, and they are confronting their teachers head-on. Regardless of whether Marlon is arrogant or not, they still tend to favor Marlon in their hearts. A few students even secretly gave Marlon a thumbs up and whispered, "Come on." Wei Chonglin wanted to scold those students who cheered for Marlon. But before he could say anything, Marlon's calm voice came to his ears. "Teacher, shall we start now? If you have any questions, as long as they are about stock market analysis and economics, you can ask as many as you want." "Okay then." Wei Chonglin glanced at the students and memorized their appearances, thinking that he would clean them up together when he had time. Then he turned to look at Marlon and said, "Teacher, you're welcome. I'll ask the question first." "Please." Marlon held out his hand, a nonchalant look on his face. "Humph. Keep pretending and wait and see." Marlon's attitude made Wei Chonglin very unhappy. He snorted coldly, returned to the podium, pointed to a page on the PPT courseware, and said in a condescending tone, "My question is very simple. Look at the picture. This is the stock analysis of Linzhou Hengyuan Group. In the past few years, the stock of Hengyuan Group has been fluctuating. I have summarized the various factors and data that affect its stock. Now please guess, based on the analysis of the stock data of the past few years, what will be the general situation of Hengyuan Group stocks in the next few years?" After asking the question, Wei Chonglin still maintained the dignity of a teacher on his face, but a sneer appeared in his heart. This type of stock analysis looks simple, with just a line that goes up and down and appears to be in a regular pattern, but it is actually the most difficult. Stocks are not a fixed function graph formula. There are too many influencing factors. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many investors whose stocks hit the limit down, causing them to line up on rooftops to jump off buildings. Wei Chonglin believed that even a world-famous stock analyst could not judge the stock trend of a group based on just one page of data in the PPT. Marlon was just a freshman who was dressed in rustic clothes and looked like he had never seen the world, so it was even more impossible. However, Marlon only glanced at the name of the group and spoke without hesitation. The stock of Hengyuan Group has been on an upward trend since it hit its lowest point 5 years ago. Until now, it has exceeded the highest stock value when Hengyuan Group was first established. "Teacher, I wonder if what I said is correct." The data on Wei Chonglin's PPT courseware was from 5 years ago, and Wei Chonglin asked Marlon to guess the stock changes of Hengyuan Group from 5 years ago to now. If he guessed for the future, there would be no way to verify it, and the bet would fail. Wei Chonglin took a deep breath. He had overlooked one thing. He had only let Marlon guess, but he himself had forgotten to check the result. He also didn't know the stock changes of Hengyuan Group in the past 5 years. He relies entirely on this PPT courseware in class. He has been using it for several years and is too lazy to update it. At this point, Wei Chonglin was a little panicked, but he rolled his eyes and calmly said to the students in the class, "Everyone, is Marlon right or wrong? Does anyone know?" The students were all newbies and had no idea about this, so in order to verify it, they started checking it one by one on their phones. Hengyuan Group is quite famous in Linzhou City, and it was easily found out. Hengyuan Group has been developing very well in the past 5 years, and its stock has indeed soared. Marlon is right. A student raised his hand and told Wei Chonglin that Marlon was right, with a proud expression on his face, as if he was right. Wei Chonglin felt like he had eaten a dead fly. He didn't expect that Marlon could actually guess it right. In fact, Marlon's analysis was not based on guesswork, nor was it based on the data provided by Wei Chonglin. The data provided by Wei Chonglin is already outdated. According to the data, the stock price of Hengyuan Group will most likely continue to fall in the next few years, and eventually hit the limit down and go bankrupt. Marlon knew about the stock changes of Hengyuan Group was entirely because Hengyuan Group was invested by his Su family. It's that simple. How could I not know whether the stock price of the company my family invested in is going up or down? 5 years ago, Hengyuan Group was on the verge of bankruptcy. The Su family invested and saved Hengyuan Group, and then it grew and developed. Well, Marlon, you're in luck. Let me ask you another question. Wei Chonglin also asked about the stock changes of several companies and groups. Marlon answered without even a pause. It was all right. It was so easy. These questions may seem difficult to others, but for Marlon, this is the situation of his family. It is just like an outsider asking, "Is so-and-so in your family healthy?" How could Marlon not know that most of the companies and groups that Wei Chonglin asked about were owned by Marlon's family or had investments in them? There is simply no challenge. Marlon shook his head in disappointment. Wei Chonglin's questioning group is limited to Linzhou, and there is not even one in the country. Marlin followed Uncle Xiang for a while, traveling around the world and acquiring thousands of companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars. He also invested in countless companies. For Marlin, stock analysis was just one of the most basic skills to acquire these companies. Wei Chonglin was anxiously flipping through his PPT courseware. He began to panic. Every time he confidently asked a question to challenge Marlin, Marlin would answer it fluently. At first, he thought Marlin was just guessing blindly, but after 1, 2, 3, and 4 times, Wei Chonglin realized that Marlin's knowledge of stocks was really vast. All the questions on the PPT courseware were asked, even the introductory part. Who was the first stock analyst? The origin and development of stocks, and other questions were asked. Marlin can not only explain it, but also expand on it, explaining major stock investment cases in a simple and easy-to-understand manner with citations from classics. This allows many students who have never been exposed to stocks to understand it at once. This is the master. Simplifying the complex stock analysis is so interesting. After listening to Marlin's words, many students developed a strong interest in stock analysis, and some students have even made up their minds to make stock analysis their lifelong career. These are the effects of Marlin's words. Chapter 30, Shortage of Knowledge. Wei Chonglin racked his brains to think about his knowledge of stock analysis, but he did not prepare for class in the past few years and just read from the PPT courseware. His knowledge of stock analysis had already deteriorated. He really could not think of any questions to ask Marlin. Teacher, I see you have no more questions to ask. How about I ask you a question instead? Marlin couldn't help but smile and ask. I haven't even answered enough, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I didn't expect the teacher's knowledge base to be exhausted. Marlin thought depressedly. Nonsense. My next question is too difficult for you. If you ask more, people will say I am bullying you. Since you know a little bit about stock analysis, I am still appreciative of your talent, so I will let you go this time. Now, ask your questions. Wei Chonglin is a stubborn person, and he certainly won't admit that he has little knowledge of stock analysis. Marlin sneered at Wei Chonglin's hypocrisy in his heart, thought of a relatively simple question, and asked, Teacher, I want to ask who is the most powerful and awesome stock analyst in the world right now? Hey, this is an easy question. I know. Wei Chonglin was overjoyed and full of confidence, blurting out, It's the legendary figure of Wall Street, Vermeer Johnson. I got it right. Boy, you asked such a simple question. Are you trying to humiliate me? But you still underestimated me. Just wait for your automatic expulsion. Huh? After Wei Chonglin answered the question, a smile broke out on his face. He had seen this answer before when he was preparing for class diligently, and he was extremely confident. No. Marlin spat out 2 words directly. What's wrong? Wei Chonglin's face changed. How dare you cheat me? I clearly got it right. Vermeer Johnson was the most powerful stock analyst in the world in the 1970s and 1980s. This is the most basic common sense for those who study stock analysis. How dare you say it's wrong? Marlin didn't want to explain too much, shook his head with disdain, and said softly, Can someone check who is the most powerful stock analyst right now? Wei Chonglin saw that Marlin looked calm and composed, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. Could it be? The world's most powerful stock analyst has changed? Am I wrong? That's not right. A few months ago, I heard people say that the most powerful stock analyst was still Vermeer Johnson. How could he be replaced in just a few months? Thinking of this, Wei Chonglin secretly took out his mobile phone and wanted to check Wikipedia. He opened the screen of his mobile phone, and suddenly, a student exclaimed, I found out. I found out. According to Wikipedia, the world's most powerful stock analyst is no longer Vermeer Johnson, but he is a Chinese. His name is Zhang Zixiang. Is that right? Before the student finished speaking, Marlin took over and spoke in a decisive tone. Marlin today. Just last month, Zhang Zixiang used a stock analysis method that shocked the world to directly acquire $5 trillion companies, and at the same time almost caused another financial crisis in the United States. After this incident, Zhang Zixiang became famous in the stock analysis circle and became the stock god of Wall Street. He also squeezed out Vermeer Johnson to become the most powerful stock analyst in the world. This is also recognized within Wall Street, although it has not yet been fully spread. But a month later, Marlin felt that Wikipedia should have been updated. Now, Zhang Zixiang has indeed become the most powerful stock analyst. What? Impossible. How could it be a Chinese? The Chinese are still far behind the Americans in terms of stock analysis. Impossible. Wei Chonglin couldn't believe it. He checked on his mobile phone while talking. When he found it, he shut up instantly. You have to believe it even if you don't want to. Wikipedia clearly states, Zhang Zixiang, the most powerful stock analysis god. There is also a personal photo of Zhang Zixiang next to it. He is a middle-aged man with a kind smile, but his eyes reveal great majesty. Teacher, you got the answer wrong. Marlin teased Wei Chonglin. No way. No way. As a teacher of stock market analysis, you really don't know this most basic common sense, right? Wei Chonglin's face turned red. He cursed Marlin's ancestors in his heart and teased him for a long time, but he couldn't find a way to refute Marlin's words. Teacher, are you still going to answer my questions? My questions are getting harder and harder. If I give up now, it won't be considered that I lose. It can only be considered that I am tired and don't want to answer anymore. Marlin smiled. This gave Wei Chonglin a way out, and his anger had almost subsided. Marlin said this. Wei Chonglin hesitated whether to give up, but when he saw Marlin's look, he became very angry. He was just taking advantage of the situation and saw the information by chance. Now, as long as I take it seriously, the questions raised by a student of his will definitely not be difficult for me. As his mind was changing, Wei Chonglin still couldn't swallow this breath. His teeth were clattering, and he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Come on, ask questions quickly. This teacher, you still think you haven't lost enough face. I gave you a way out, but you still don't take advantage of it. Marlin shook his head in amusement. Since Wei Chonglin still wanted to play, he would have fun with him. What is the most important thing in stock analysis? Marlin asked again. What is the most important thing? Wei Chonglin thought about it and had an answer in his mind, but this time he didn't dare to answer easily. He touched his chin, pondered for a moment, and said all the answers in his mind at once. Location, market value, market conditions, performance. After talking a lot, Wei Chonglin felt complacent with his cleverness and thought, as long as I answer correctly, it will be fine. There is no limit on how many times I can answer. I can just say all the answers at once, so there is no way I can guess wrong. Marlin was a little speechless. Why didn't he think of playing it this way? Although Wei Chonglin said so much, the correct answer was not among them. Marlin shook his head. Seeing Marlin shaking his head, Wei Chonglin began to feel uneasy again. Could it be that I was wrong again? Isn't that right? Wei Chonglin asked with a frown. No. Marlin then gave the correct answer. The most important thing in stock analysis is to analyze investor psychology. You are talking nonsense again. I have never heard of investor psychology. Do you think I will believe you just because you made up a word? If so, no matter what answer I give, it can't be right. Wei Chonglin's nostrils opened and closed with anger, like an old bat. Your knowledge is so limited, and you don't learn new things. I don't know how you became a teacher and a professor. Marlin sneered bluntly. Marlin finally understood why China's stock analysis could not compare with those in developed countries. It was because there were many teachers like Wei Chonglin who were only seeking fame and reputation and prevented the development of this course. Chapter 31 Complaint. Marlin sighed and then explained. Last year, Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in Economics, and he believes that psychology and economics are closely related, and economics is closely related to stock analysis. The movement of stocks all depends on the choices made by investors. Therefore, the most important thing in stock analysis is to analyze the psychology of investors. It was this research that earned Richard Thaler the Nobel Prize in Economics, and this is a view that everyone in the industry agrees on. Teacher, no way? No way? You don't even care about this, do you? Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in Economics, which is a big event in the economics community. Your stock market analysis course is also a branch of economics, and you don't even know this. Marlin spoke eloquently and with solid arguments. After Marlin finished speaking, a student also found the corresponding information on his mobile phone. He shouted excitedly, attracting the attention of a group of people. When everyone saw what Marlin said was true, they were convinced by Marlin and filled with endless admiration. They thought Marlin was just a poor boy from the country, but they didn't expect that Marlin had such rich knowledge of stock analysis. It is true that the real person does not show his true face. Wei Chonglin lowered his head. If there was a crack on the ground, he would definitely want to crawl into it. This man was really embarrassed. A student knew more than him, the teacher. In the past, he relied on the pretentious authority of an old teacher and the PPT courseware he bought with money to fool batches of students. The students didn't understand anyway, so he just gave a casual lecture, asked someone to make a test paper for the final exam, and then he would take the test and that was it. It was so cool. But who would have thought that today, while showing off his sword in front of Guangdong, he would meet Marlin and get slapped in the face madly. Ding-ling-ling. At this time, the bell for the end of Get Out of Class rang. Wei Chonglin had never been so eager for the Get Out of Class to end, and had never thought that the bell for the end of Get Out of Class would be so beautiful and pleasant. Cough, cough, cough. Wei Chonglin coughed violently a few times to cover up his embarrassment. Classmates, Get Out of Class is over. Time flies. The school stipulates that teachers cannot keep students after class. We cannot violate the school's rules. He didn't dare to look at Marlin. He was too embarrassed. At this moment, he just wanted to escape from the classroom as far as possible. He regretted even more why Marlin asked him to give up just now, but he refused. Wei Chonglin turned around and left, forgetting to take his water cup. Marlin smiled and reminded him from behind. Teacher, you forgot to take your water cup. Wei Chonglin leaned his head against the wall, turned around to get the cup back, and just took 2 steps. He heard Marlin say, Teacher, can we discuss issues more often in the future? I still have many questions I want to ask you. Hey, teacher, that bet. Hey, teacher, don't walk so fast. Be careful of the steps. Marlin spoke, the faster Wei Chonglin ran, and he was out of the classroom door in a flash. Wei Chonglin got angrier and angrier as he walked out of the door. He turned around and went to the principal's office. Principal Sam was looking down at a newspaper. When he heard footsteps, he looked up and saw Wei Chonglin barging in without even knocking on the door. He was a little angry, put down the newspaper, and said lightly, What's up? Wei Chonglin immediately pretended to be extremely angry, shook his sleeves, and began to tell tales. It's lawless, Principal. The students in the 6th class of the Business Talent Program are really lawless. Principal, you have to take care of them. If we don't take care of the students now, we won't be able to have this class anymore. Sam didn't know what happened to make Wei Chonglin angry, frowned and asked, What's wrong? Wei Chonglin snorted to express his dissatisfaction. There is a student in Class 6 of the Business Talent School who is not only late but also eats in class. He doesn't listen to me and has a very arrogant attitude. He cursed at me and insulted the teacher. He almost hit me. As a student, the most important thing is moral character, and this student obviously does not have that. He is beyond redemption. Letting him stay in our school will ruin the reputation of the school, so I suggest expelling this student. Anyway, just say whatever bad things about Marlin you want. Sam knew Wei Chonglin's personality and character, and knew that Wei Chonglin must have exaggerated. However, as the principal, he couldn't just ignore this matter, so he had to be patient and asked, It's not that serious, right? Eating in class is against the class rules, but it's not enough to expel the student, right? Oh, by the way, what's the student's family background? Sam suddenly thought of the last sentence. After all, the students who come to Goen Jinsho Business School generally come from good families. Of course, some of them are admitted based on their own academic performance, and their scores are not low. Only the top students among the top students have the opportunity to enter Goen Jinsho Business School. If the student's family is well off, you have to be more cautious if you want to expel him. That student is wearing shabby clothes, and it seems that his family is not well off. The principal doesn't need to worry. A poor boy like him can be given a free ride. When Wei Chonglin said this, he realized that he had said the wrong thing and shut up. Actually, it wasn't that he said something wrong. It was indeed what he thought in his heart, but it was too blunt and didn't fit in with his usual hypocritical identity. It was also because he was really pissed off by Marlin today. Sam rolled his eyes, thinking that Wei Chonglin was usually a hypocrite, but this time he was exposed. He wanted to scold Wei Chonglin, but then he thought of the identity of Wei Chonglin's wife, sighed, and gave up. Wei Chonglin's wife is one of the shareholders of Goen Jinsho Business School. Her family conditions are very good, and her family background is not small. This is the biggest reason why Wei Chonglin, a fool with poor teaching ability and bad conduct as a human being, can become an associate professor. However, what people talked about most about Wei Chonglin was that he was a son-in-law who lived with the wife's family. To put it nicely, he was a son-in-law, but to put it bluntly, he was a gigolo. Back then, Wei Chonglin's wife Xiang suffered from a strange disease when she was young. She asked someone to calculate it, and the person said that she had encountered bad things and needed a marriage to get rid of the bad things. So Xiang Tsuetsue's family tried to recruit a live-in son-in-law, but no one came to propose marriage. The reason was very simple. Xiang Tsuetsue was ugly. She was short and fat, with a big birthmark on the left half of her face. It was so scary to see her in the dark that she could star in a horror movie without any makeup. In that era, live-in sons-in-law were despised, unlike now, when young people don't know the good of their aunts and mistakenly treat young girls as treasures. Being on the list of rich women is a matter of honor for the family. But Wei Chonglin, who had foresight, went there and was successfully selected. Moreover, Wei Chonglin was very obedient to his wife. So although he lacked dignity and felt depressed, his material life was still good. Wei Chonglin was the principal of a high school because of the Xiang family's connections. However, he made a mistake, and the Xiang family got him a job at the Goen Jinsho Business School, where he worked as an associate professor and lived a very happy life. Chapter 32 Threats. Because of this, Sam was helpless about Wei Chonglin's gangster behavior and could only turn a blind eye. He is a leader and has the final say on small matters, but he is constrained by shareholders on all sides when making big decisions. Sam took a sip of the pu'er tea on the table, thought for a while, and decided to give Wei Chonglin face. Deal with that person, and let Wei Chonglin vent his anger. How about this? Let that person write a 2,000-word self-criticism and then clean the corridors for the cleaning lady for a week. How about that? Sam was already relatively light among all the others. Wei Chonglin felt that it was not satisfying enough, but the leader had already made the decision and he couldn't push it any further. He also felt that it was unlikely that Marlin would be fired, so he nodded and wanted to turn around and leave. At this time, Sam remembered that he had not asked the man's name yet. If he didn't know the name, how would he punish him? He called Wei Chonglin and asked, "What was that man's name?" "My last name is Sue Marlin," Wei Chonglin answered casually. Bang! Sam's hand fell to the ground and shattered, and the pu'er tea spilled all over the floor. "What's wrong with you?" Wei Chonglin was startled by the sound and said in surprise. He saw that Sam looked a little panicked. In his impression, Sam was a person who was very good at cultivating his chi. This was the first time he saw such a look of disarray on his face. Sam breathed in and out, repeating this for a minute before he calmed down. His chest stopped rising and falling violently, and a hint of relief flashed in his eyes. Fortunately, I was cautious enough, asked for the name, and did not rashly ask someone to deal with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't even know how I died. Marlin is a great god. He is someone I can only look up to, especially his mysterious grandfather, who can make the top leader of Linzhou move his position with just one phone call. I dare to mess with Marlin. Do I think I have lived too long? Sam thought with lingering fear. His eyes suddenly became sharp, and he looked at Wei Chonglin, who was still unaware of the truth. This guy almost killed me. Compared to Marlin's grandfather, his wife is nothing. He could kill his wife with just one finger. Wei Chonglin, I think this matter needs to be investigated thoroughly. Sam spoke, his voice cold and completely different from his attitude just now. Upon hearing this, Wei Chonglin was stunned. What happened to Sam? Wasn't it already decided? Why did his attitude suddenly change? He smiled awkwardly and said puzzledly, "Isn't the situation very clear? Marlin is a lawless guy. Why bother investigating? Just punish him, and that's it. Are you teaching me how to do things?" Sam's voice became even colder. Gurgle. Wei Chonglin swallowed his saliva, a little scared, but he thought that he had his wife's support. Although Sam was a leader, he was just a senior employee. He was not afraid of him. Suddenly, Wei Chonglin became tough again, raised his head proudly, and said proudly, "I think you're targeting me. I am very dissatisfied. I was humiliated by Marlin. What's wrong with giving him some punishment?" After saying this, he felt that his words were still not enough, so he paused and added, "More important than my wife Xiang Tsui, the shareholder?" The threat in the words was very clear. Although my status is not high, my wife is a shareholder here. If you offend me because of Marlin, I will not be polite. Sam smiled and shook his head. It was not a fearful and flattering smile, but a sneer. As a leader, he had to take all aspects into consideration, especially when talking to people. Naturally, he immediately heard the hidden meaning in Wei Chonglin's words. But even if Wei Chonglin threatened, Sam could still tell the difference between the important and the unimportant. Even if he offended 100 Wei Changlins and Xiang Tsui, he would not offend Marlin. The two forces were simply not of the same level, and Xiang Tsui was not even worthy of carrying his shoes. Wei Chonglin. Sam took a sip of tea, sat casually on the sofa in the office, stared at Wei Chonglin, and said lightly, "I remember that last month, a woman came to me to complain, saying that you had touched her and tried to molest her. Although you didn't succeed, she was greatly traumatized and is now recovering at home. Oh, by the way, in the month before last, an aunt also came to me to complain, saying that you sneaked into someone's house in the middle of the night and tried to steal their underwear. And also the month before last, a girl, Sam said it lightly, but the content of his words was not polite at all. These are all Wei Chonglin's bad deeds. I don't know if it's because Wei Chonglin's life is too frustrating or his wife is too ugly, which leads to psychological distortion and some special fetishes. He likes to steal other girls' underwear. It would have been fine if it had just been like this, and it wasn't a particularly serious matter, but later on, he became more and more bold, and he started to touch girls inappropriately. These things were about to spread. Wei Chonglin was sweating a few drops at his temples when he heard this. He didn't understand why Sam brought up this matter. To humiliate himself? How dare he? Wasn't he afraid that I would ask my wife to remove him from his position? Regardless of what Wei Chonglin thought, Sam continued to speak to himself. These things all have victims, and some have witnesses and physical evidence. Wei Chonglin, if I call the police and ask the police to investigate, they should be able to sentence you to indecency and molestation. You will have to spend a year or so in jail, right? Even if your wife uses her connections to get you out, your life will still be tarnished. Do you think it's possible for you to stay here? Wei Chonglin threatened Sam. Sam had been a leader for so many years and was no pushover. He also had some leverage over Wei Chonglin. Sam, what do you mean by that? Wei Chonglin was not a fool either. He also understood Sam's attitude towards him. His face was grim. What I mean is, I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of my office. As for Marlon's meal, I'll handle it however I want. It's not your turn to tell me what to do. Sam's face, which had been calm just now, became serious, and he stared at Wei Chonglin with sharp eyes. The two looked at each other, and sparks flew between them. 3. Sam starts counting down. 2. Humph. Wei Chonglin snorted coldly after being defeated and turned to leave. Sam, you are so brave now. You dare to offend me for a poor boy. Just wait. I will remember this matter. You will pay it back sooner or later. As I walked out the door, I kept muttering to myself. And there's that guy named Marlon. He brought shame to me. How dare you mess with me? When I get the chance, I'll take care of you too. Chapter 33, Conspiracy. Marlon sighed. After Wei Chonglin left, the class was silent for a while. Then there was cheering and chaos. The students of Class 6 of Business Talent were very happy. Marlon's performance, his tough confrontation with Wei Chonglin, and his constant upper hand made these students who were usually oppressed by Wei Chonglin breathe a sigh of relief. At this time, Marlon had apparently become a heroic figure for most of the students in Class 6 of Business Talent. The name for Marlon changed from Bumpkin to Brother Chin. Everyone called him Brother Chun in a particularly affectionate manner. But there are also some who are not convinced, such as Rex, Samo, and others who have grudges against Marlon. They looked at the other students making noise in the class and were furious. Who is Marlon? He's just a bumpkin, but now he has become the hero of the class. Isn't it just because he has learned some knowledge? Once they enter society and have no background, people like this will just have to work for me and my family. Rex thought hard. His family opened a construction company, which was not small in scale. There were some top students who graduated from famous universities, such as 985 and 211 in the company. Every time he met graduates from these prestigious universities, they were polite to him because of his status. His monthly pocket money now is what those graduates have to work hard for a whole year, working 996 hours a day. Seeing those graduates working overtime, getting scolded, being humble, and acting like office workers just to get a little bit of his pocket money, he feels that these students who study well are of no use. Although it is cruel, this is the fact and the sadness of the times. Boss, look at Marlon. He looks so nonchalant. It makes me angry. Damn, he's such a pretentious guy. He really stole the limelight today. Su Mu came close to Rex and said angrily. If you ask who hated Marlon the most, it was him. He still remembered the time when Marlon slapped him in the restaurant. It was so embarrassing. Rex followed Su Mu's gaze and saw Marlon looking leisurely, while Jessica, the school beauty next to Marlon, was looking at Marlon with starry eyes. This was like adding fuel to the fire, making Rex's rage even greater. His eyes seemed to be burning with flames. If this flame could hurt people, Marlon would probably have been burned to ashes. Jessica, the beauty in class. He pursued her, and not only did he make Marlon his desk mate, but he also made Jessica like him, which was a great stimulation to Rex. Damn it! Rex also cursed, retracted his gaze, and said to Su Mu and Marx, "No, I can't stand this kid anymore. I have to find a way to deal with him. Otherwise, this kid will be so arrogant." Su Mu's eyes lit up, and he immediately became excited. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. So he quickly asked, "Boss, you tell me how to deal with him. I'll be the first one to go." Come, come, come. Rex waved to the two of them and crawled under the table. Sumo and Marks immediately understood and also bent down and crawled under the table. The three of them were chattering in low voices, discussing conspiracies and intrigues. Jessica did have some admiration for Marlon, but it was not to the point of blindly worshiping him or looking at him with starry eyes. Rex's eyes were just the added effect of his hatred for Marlon. "Marlon, how do you know so much about stock analysis? Have you learned it before? That's not right. You are from the countryside. How could you possibly be exposed to such a niche subject as stock analysis? Then how did you do it just now? Could it be that teacher Wei Chonglin was acting with you again? Did you know the answer in advance?" Before Marlon even sat down, Jessica couldn't resist her curiosity and bombarded him with questions. Marlon was helpless and felt that there was a lot of noise in his ears. Wasn't this class beauty sitting next to him just now annoyed with him and didn't seem to want to talk to him? Then Marlon thought of something and spoke angrily. "Class beauty, don't ask so many questions. I want to ask you, why did you report me first? I was waiting to turn myself in after dinner, but you reported me all of a sudden, turning me from actively confessing to being a passive offender. These two natures are very different." Jessica was suddenly stunned. She asked him a question, but he didn't answer. She didn't expect this guy to blame her. You know, the boys in the class were eager to find questions and topics to talk to her, but this guy didn't appreciate it. Linda Banhwa was furious and retorted sharply. "You still dare to blame me? You made my thermos dirty, and I haven't even settled the score with you yet. Well, I soiled your thermos cup, and you reported me to the teacher, so we are even now." Marlon waved his hand and said indifferently, "What?" Jessica sat up straight, indignant. "You wish. Do you know how much my thermos means to me? I firmly—" Before she finished her words, Marlon suddenly remembered something and slapped his thigh, which scared Jessica. Thinking that Marlon was going to hit someone, she quickly covered her chest with both hands and stammered, "What are you going to do? This is in the classroom. If you dare to hit me, the other boys in the class will not let you go." Marlon was in no mood to pay attention to Jessica now and simply rolled his eyes at the little girl. Paul, who was hit by the eraser behind him. He had just said he would accompany him to the colonel's infirmary, but was interrupted by Jessica, and Marlon forgot about it. Marlon quickly turned around and looked at Paul behind him. Paul was still rubbing his eye sockets. Although Marlon didn't let him rub them, he felt. "I felt her all the time and kept crying. I really couldn't help it." Marlon hit Paul on the head and scolded him with a smile. "Let go of your dog paw now. Don't rub it even if it hurts. You're almost rubbing your cornea off." After hearing what Marlon said, Paul really held back his discomfort and stopped rubbing. He looked up and gave Marlon a silly smile. "I listened to Brother Chen." Marlon saw that Paul's eyes were red again and knew that he needed to wash out the impurities in Paul's eyes quickly, so he took Paul's hand. "Let's go to the school infirmary." "But Brother Chen, class is about to start, and we have another class in the afternoon." Paul was a little hesitant. He was a good student, and he came from a poor family, but he got in with excellent grades. He didn't want to skip classes for fear that he would not be there when the teacher called his name, resulting in failing the course and not getting the scholarship for this semester. Marlon saw what Paul was thinking. He could also tell from Paul's clothes that Paul's family conditions were not very good, but how could he ignore his health for the scholarship? So Marlon frowned. "Listen to me. Just go if I tell you to. Don't worry about this or that. I'll take care of you. Even if you really don't show up when the teacher calls you, I'll explain to the teacher. If you don't get the scholarship because of this, I'll pay for it myself and give you 10 times the money. Is that okay?" Chapter 34 Apology. Paul shrank his neck, knowing that if he didn't go, Marlon would probably be really angry, so he nodded, agreeing reluctantly. As for Marlon's last words, saying that he would compensate him 10 times, Paul didn't believe it at all. In his mind, Marlon's family conditions are similar to his own, or even worse. That day, when Marlon took the ham out of the trash can and ate it, he had already classified Marlon as the same as himself. Paul had tears in one eye and couldn't see the ground clearly. Marlon held his arm and walked from the corridor to the door. Before they had walked far, Marlon suddenly felt something appear under his feet. He reacted quickly and stopped. He looked down and saw 2 legs lying across the middle of the aisle. Ah! Paul didn't have Marlon's observation and reaction ability, and one of his eyes was injured. He didn't pay attention to his feet at all and was knocked down suddenly. Bang! His forehead hit the corner of the table, and a big bump appeared instantly, making him grimace in pain. Paul looked at the legs of the culprit then looked up along the legs and found that it was Su Mu and Marks, his two roommates, who were responsible. These two people were standing next to two tables in the corridor, one on the left and one on the right, with their legs stretched out, just blocking the entire corridor. Just now, someone walked by here but passed safely. That was because these two people didn't even stretch their legs. As soon as Marlon and Paul arrived, these two men stepped back, and they both stepped back at the same time, as if they had agreed. Obviously, they did it on purpose. In the distance, Rex was sitting on a chair, holding the latest model of Apple mobile phone in his hand, with the camera turned on, recording this side. Rex wanted to record the ugly scene of Marlon being kicked down, but he only recorded the unlucky Paul, who was grimacing in pain after his forehead hit the corner of the table. "Hey, who is that?" Paul rubbed his forehead, which was in pain from being hit. He wanted to yell at who was so wicked to put their legs in the middle of the corridor, but when he saw that the two people who stretched their legs were Marks and Su Mu, the two evil guys, he swallowed the next words back into his stomach and just lowered his head and continued to rub his forehead to relieve the pain. Marks and the other man saw Paul's timid look, exchanged glances, and laughed jokingly. Their original target was Marlon, and they implicated Paul, but they did not feel guilty. Anyway, they sometimes bullied Paul even more harshly than this. "What do you want to say? Paul, you want to scold us? Just go ahead and scold one of us." Su Mu raised his eyebrows and spoke in a provocative tone. At this time, the movement here has attracted the attention and onlookers of most people. Most people know that Marks and Su Mu are bad people, and they must know that these two people are looking for trouble. But because of their notoriety, no one dares to speak for Paul, and they all remain silent. With so many people watching, Paul, as a man, also has his dignity. His face turned red and white when he was looked at by people around him. Before, when he was bullied by two people, there were only three people inside. He can endure it. He can silently swallow these grievances, quietly lick his wounds, and the next day, he can put his mood in a good mood and talk and laugh with others. As the saying goes, if a person embarrasses himself, it is the same as not embarrassing himself. But being watched by so many people, who were not strangers but familiar faces from his class, and who went to eat together every day, how could Paul face it calmly in the future? Paul wanted to muster up the courage to be tougher, at least not to be so humiliating, but when he saw the faces of Marks and Paul, he gave up. "Oh, forget it. I'm being tough now. When I get back at night, they won't let me go. I have to be patient, but they will probably call me a coward in their hearts, right?" Paul sighed and suddenly felt that life was quite boring. He had finally come to this dream school with great effort, but in return, he was still unhappy and was still bullied. He was very confused. He racked his brains but couldn't figure out why this happened. He had studied hard for more than 10 years, but he still ended up like this. "Apologize." Suddenly, a cold voice was heard. It was not loud, but the chill in the voice made everyone present tremble. Marks and Su Mu looked in the direction of the voice, only to see Marlon looking at them with a cold face. In his black and white pupils, there was a huge amount of anger hidden in the calmness. Marlon could see through this trick at a glance and understand the whole story at once. Su Mu and Marks and the others, no matter who they are, even if they can come openly, Marlon will not be afraid, and he doesn't think it's a big deal. In a fair fight, even if he is not as strong or skilled as the other person, and is beaten to death or maimed, Marlon can accept it calmly without any resentment or hatred. Marlon couldn't stand being provoked by such petty tricks, dirty tricks, and undermining methods. Moreover, Paul was implicated, which made Marlon even more annoyed. Marks and Su Mu were so frightened by Marlon's aura that they forgot to speak. Others did not dare to interrupt, and there was silence for a while. "I said sorry. Didn't you hear me?" Marlon spoke again, his voice less cold, but more impatient. At the same time, Marlon took a light step forward, and it seemed that he was about to take action. Su Mu's lips trembled a few times. He remembered the scene when he was knocked away by Marlon. The pain on his face still hurts when he thinks about it now. He didn't want to do it again. He was the first to speak quickly. "Sorry." Marlon narrowed his eyes, pointed at Paul on the ground, and said calmly, "Don't just apologize to me, apologize to Paul too." This. Su Mu began to feel embarrassed. He could apologize to Marlon because he was afraid of Marlon's use of physics to subdue people. But apologizing to Paul made him feel embarrassed. Paul? He is the little guy who was bullied every day, a timid and useless person who can't do anything. Now he is asked to apologize to Paul in a low voice. He can't reverse this role change. At this time, Marks came to his senses from his confusion. He had never been beaten by Marlon, so he was much less afraid of Marlon than Sumu. Seeing Marlon's pretentious look, he pointed at Marlon's face and argued, "Are you an idiot? Why should we apologize? What did we do wrong? Our legs were just numb, so we put them down in the corridor to relax. You guys tripped over them, and I told you guys to step on my legs." Chapter 35 Lessons. I haven't asked you to apologize yet, Marlon, and you still have the nerve to ask me to apologize. Look, Paul doesn't even dare to say anything, and you are just pretending to be a nobody here. Marx felt very relieved after he finished speaking. With so many people in the class watching him, he spoke in a very loud tone and felt very awesome. You deserve to be punished? Marlon didn't want to waste any more time talking to Marx, so he uttered for words, started moving his neck, and slowly walked towards Marx. Crack, crack. There was a crisp sound of bones cracking in the neck. Marx didn't expect Marlon to start fighting after just one sentence. He thought he was good at swearing, but when it came to fighting, he, with his skinny arms and legs, was no match for Sumu. Although he was not so afraid of Marlon, he had heard about Sumu being beaten by Marlon, and he did not think that he could defeat Marlon. When he saw Marlon walking towards him, he jumped over 2 or 3 desks and chairs, trying to stay away from Marlon. But Marlon was much faster than him. As soon as he jumped over a chair, Marlon was already waiting for him in front of him. You dare to touch me? If you dare to touch me, I will let you." Marx immediately embraced Marlon. He felt that Marlon's muscles were as hard as steel plates, which hurt him. He threatened with some fear. However, before he could finish his threat, Marlon grabbed his neck and lifted him up like a chicken. Marx's feet were hanging off the ground, and he kicked his legs violently like a hanged man. He even had an idea to kick Marlon's knees. However, his womanly strength was no threat to Marlon at all. Marlon didn't even bother to block it. Let me go, I'll give you 10,000 yuan. Marx began to tempt Marlon with money and bargained with Marlon. He felt that $10,000 was a huge sum of money that Marlon had never seen before. Marlon just sneered. $10,000, are you giving to a beggar? Marlon, indifferent, carried Marx, walked around several tables, and came to Paul and Sumu. Seeing this, Marx shouted in his heart, "CC, he is indeed a violent maniac. Marlon is really fierce when he starts to fight. I really had foresight and didn't let him fight hard. Fortunately but Marx was miserable. Poor him, he was not as smart as me." The students in Class 6 of the Business Talent Program were also surprised to see this. They had not expected Marlon to be so simple and crude. But most students, although they thought Marlon was being cool, actually thought it was a brainless act. That's Marx. His family has tens of millions of assets. He's a rich young man. You're just a country boy. How can you compare with him? You have strong arms and you are a top student, but what good is that? In today's society, what matters is not these things, but power and money. People who have these two things can walk sideways in society. If you have nothing, you just need to be a good person and behave yourself. How dare you show off without thinking about your family in the countryside and doing things without considering the consequences? Everyone shook their heads secretly. They were all smart people and could see it clearly. Cough. Marx didn't have the mind to think so much. He felt that his neck no longer belonged to him. His trachea seemed to be tied with a rubber band. He couldn't breathe. His brain was lacking oxygen, his eyes were black, and he felt like he was going to faint. Bang! Marlon threw the suffocating Marx to the ground like a sack. Huff, huff, huff. Marx greedily took a deep breath of the long-lost air. He had never felt that the air that was everywhere was so precious. He actually tasted a hint of sweetness from the air. I'll ask you again, will you apologize or not? This is your last chance. Don't challenge my patience. Otherwise, you will pay a price you can't imagine. Marlon patted Marx's face gently. What he said was right. He had always had little patience. Outside the school, Marx had done such a trick on him and looked unrepentant. Marlon didn't mind breaking one of his legs. If they were on a mission in the martial arts world or organization, Marlon might have just killed Marx. But this is a school, a place to cultivate the garden of the motherland. And the students here are not enemies, so there is no need to kill them. However, Marlon can still cut off one of Marx's fingers. Marx seemed not to hear Marlon's words. He just kept breathing heavily, like a dying fish thrown ashore. Of course he did hear it. Marlon was so close to him, and his voice was quite loud. It was impossible for him not to hear it. He just pretended not to hear it. He was praying in his mind. Let the class start soon, let the class start soon. Once the teacher comes, he won't dare to hit me again. Very good. You dare to ignore me. Then I will teach you a lesson. Marlon curled his lips. Marx's little tricks were nowhere to be hidden in his eyes. Marlon reached out his hand, grasped Mark's little finger, and gently bent it, almost without any force. Mark's little finger was bent into a terrifying 90-degree reverse bend, which made people's gums ache. It must have been very painful. Ah! Marks howled like a ghost, his face wrinkled like a chrysanthemum, with snot and tears running down his face. This kind of pain was simply unbearable for a rich young man like him. Marlon frowned in disgust. Marks's sharp scream, like a pig being slaughtered, hurt his eardrums. In fact, Marlon hadn't even broken Mark's bones yet, but it was already causing Mark's unbearable pain. Apologize. Marlon didn't want to waste time, so he covered his ear closest to Mark's and said coldly, Okay. I apologize, Brotherchin. Can you let go of my fingers first? This time, Marks was as cowardly as a dog. As expected, physical force was very effective against such people. Even Brotherchin was called in. In the face of pain, face and dignity were all gone. You have no right to negotiate. Apologize first, then I'll let go. Marlon was afraid that Marks would play some tricks again, so he increased the force of his hand on Marks's finger. The bone made a slight crackling sound, and it sounded like it could not bear the weight and was about to break. Ah! Marks's scream of pain increased by several decibels, and he quickly shouted to Marlon, I'm sorry, Brotherchin. Marlon nodded, looking fairly satisfied but still showing no intention of letting go. Marks waited for a while. The pain made his brain work quickly. Suddenly he understood and apologized to Paul beside him with a sad face. I'm sorry, Brother Yin. I was wrong. I shouldn't have tripped you on purpose. I will never bully you again. I'm sorry. Sumo was even more clever. Seeing how badly Marks was beaten by Marlon, he was afraid that he would suffer the same pain, so he apologized to Paul along with Marks. Brother Yin, no matter how many mistakes we made, they are all our fault. Brother Yin is very generous. Can you forgive us this time? Chapter 36 Paul. Brother Yin. Brother Yin. They call me Brother Yin. Is Brother Yin calling me? I feel so happy when I hear them call me Brother Yin. What's going on? Paul was in a daze, thinking in his mind that he never expected that one day he would become the strict brother of Marks and Sumu. Forget all the grievances he had suffered from Marks and Sumu since the beginning of the school year, and he felt extremely refreshed. All this is because of Brother Chun. Paul subconsciously looked at Marlon. Marlon smiled at him and nodded towards Sumu and Marks, meaning whether you forgive them or not, say something. It's your turn to show off. Paul received the signal and nodded to Marlon. Then, he cleared his throat and waved casually to Marks and Sumu. Before, you bullied me and I didn't want to bother with you. If I want to retaliate against you, I can just say one word and you will be in trouble. Brother Chun and I have been good brothers since we were young. If you hit me, you are hitting Brother Chun. If you hit my face, you are hitting Brother Chun. If you bully me, you are bullying Brother Chun. From now on, I will not indulge you anymore. You better take care of yourselves. Be honest when you see me. Paul's voice became louder and louder, and he almost believed it in the end. He finally got a chance to show off, so he did whatever he wanted. He wanted to express his anger at being bullied by Sumu and Marks. As for the possibility of being hated by Marks and Sumu and being retaliated against in the future, he had already thought of it with his clever brain that could finish 18 Olympiad math problems in one breath. Anyway, he thought that he would follow Marlon from now on, and he would hold tightly to Marlon's strong thigh. Wherever Marlon went, he would go, and he would just be Marlon's dog. When Marlon was satisfied with his licking, Marlon would not allow himself to be bullied. Brother, you are really good at bragging. When did I grow up with you? Aren't you good at bragging? Marlon screamed in his heart, feeling that he had met a rival when it comes to pretending. This guy Paul is better at pretending than himself. It's true that when he doesn't pretend, it's fine, but when he does, it's amazing. But on the surface, Marlon couldn't expose Paul's crazy boasting and had to cooperate with Paul. He could only remain calm and look unpredictable. Oh, no wonder Marlon dared to attack Marks for Paul. It turned out to be for brotherhood. He's a real man. And this Paul, who is such an awesome brother but has never made it public, silently endured the bullying from Marks and Sumu. Sure enough, he is also a character. The onlookers suddenly realized what was going on and gave Marlon and Paul a thumbs up. Paul patted his butt and stood up from the ground. The pain on his forehead was relieved a little because of the joy in his heart. He walked behind Marlon, squinting his eyes which were filled with tears due to the chalk dust, and there was a big bump on his forehead. He looked a little embarrassed, but as he stood behind Marlon, he had a sense of righteousness in his heart. The matter was resolved perfectly, and Marlon let go of Mark's fingers and stood up. "Brother Chin, let's go quickly. The teacher will be here soon, and it will be difficult to explain," Paul whispered in Marlon's ear. Marlon shook his head and said, "Don't you think something is missing?" "Brother Chin, what do you mean? What's missing?" Paul was a little confused. "Mark's Sumo, is there one person missing?" Marlon asked. "Oh." Paul's eyes lit up, and he blurted out, "Mark's Sumu Rex, but Rex is missing." Mark's, Sumu, and Rex, these three people's names are usually connected together. Just 1 month after the start of school, they have been collectively called the three idiots of the class. However, this is the nickname that the classmates gave them in private, and they dare not call them that in public. "That's right. That's the guy." Marlon pointed in a direction. "Look over there. Do you see it?" Paul looked in the direction of Marlon's finger and saw only the people in the class, craning their necks to watch the fun like silly geese. There was nothing special about it. I didn't understand what Marlon wanted him to look at, and turned to look at Marlon in confusion. Marlon reminded again, "Look at your phone." "Looking at a cell phone." "What cell phone?" Paul looked at the crowd of students again in confusion. This time, with doubt in his mind, he looked specifically for a cell phone. Sure enough, after a quick glance, he saw a cell phone sticking out from the crowded crowd of students. The camera was on, and it was recording. Behind the phone, there was half a face, hidden very secretly, still smiling smugly. Paul recognized that face. It was Rex. Rex had been recording since Paul fell, and also recorded Marlon pinching Mark's neck and flicking his fingers. Therefore, Rex was overjoyed. This was evidence that Marlon bullied other students in the class. He was going to report this video and have Marlon expelled for beating others. Of course, the scene in which Marx and Sumu deliberately tripped Paul and Marlon, as well as Mark's provocation, had to be edited out. "Brother Chun, Rex is secretly filming. He must have filmed you beating someone up. Given his personality, he'll definitely use the video to make a fuss." Paul immediately realized the seriousness of the matter and said anxiously, "Paul, now is the time for you to show your loyalty. Go and teach Rex a lesson and take his phone. There is also the ugly video of you tripping. Don't you want to delete it?" Marlon patted Paul's shoulder and instructed. Paul shrank his neck, bared his teeth and grinned, shook his head like a rattle, and laughed awkwardly. "Brother Chun, are you kidding me? I don't dare. I have never fought since I was a child. I don't think I can beat that guy Rex." Paul said was indeed the truth. He had been a typical 5 good student in the class since he was a child. He was good at studying, had a good temper, and good moral character, but he had never fought. This is also the point that Paul feels regretful about in his life. He read a post on the internet which said that these are the 10 things a real man must do in his life. Paul failed to do most of them, like this one, getting in a fight in high school. As a result, on the day after the college entrance examination, his class and a class with which they had always had a grudge planned to have a fight, but he did not go. The reason was very simple. On the day after the college entrance examination, his mother found him a summer job washing dishes in a restaurant. If you can't even think about survival, how can you have the time to engage in a fight? Marlon hesitated about what Paul said, but was not angry. He actually wanted to train Paul's dominance and slightly change Paul's timid and cowardly character. However, everyone's environment is different, and it is inevitable that they will be influenced by the environment and form different personalities. This is beyond our control and cannot be forced or blamed. But Paul didn't go, so Marlon had to go alone. Marlon said something to Paul, then narrowed his eyes and walked towards Rex. Chapter 37. Dare Not Take Action. The onlookers were unaware of what was going on. Marlon was walking towards them, and they were startled. They thought Marlon was an eyesore because of their noise and was going to attack them, so they all backed away. Only Rex was still stupidly filming a video with his phone. After everyone moved away from him, he finally reacted and saw Marlon walking towards him. Rex was startled and thought he was discovered, so he quickly wanted to retreat. However, it was too late. Marlon came to his side with one big stride. Rex felt a flash before his eyes, and when he came to his senses, he found that his cell phone had been taken away by Marlon. "Fuck, what are you doing? Why are you trying to steal my phone? Don't you know that robbery is illegal? Do you believe me if I call the police to arrest you and put you in jail?" Rex cursed, but his hands moved swiftly, trying to get the phone back. Marlon didn't let him succeed. He dodged to the side. Rex missed, stumbled, and ran forward. Marlon then kicked Rex in the ass. Pa! Rex's body was unstable to begin with, and after being kicked by Marlon, He fell headfirst to the ground, landing in the mud. "Marlon, you bastard! You're going to die. On my teeth." Rex's south face came into close contact with the ground. The floor of the classroom was made of hard tiles, and Rex's lips were broken. Rex cursed while touching his injured lip and ended up touching a hard object. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was half of his front tooth, still covered in blood. Marlon ignored Rex as shouting and looked at the screen of his phone. The screen was still showing the video recording interface, which had been recorded for nearly 7 or 8 minutes. Marlon clicked on completion, and the video was automatically saved. Then Marlon found the folder of the video and clicked on it again to completely delete it. "Here, give me back your phone." Marlon handed the phone to Rex, who was sitting on the floor. "Fuck you." Rex didn't even answer and threw the phone away. With a pop, the latest model of Apple mobile phone flew far away and fell to the ground, with the screen shattered into pieces. Marlon took one look at the half-broken Apple phone and thought, "What a spendthrift. I only use a 499 yuan phone." As for the furious Rex, Marlon turned around and left without even trying to answer him. Rex's mind was clouded by anger at this moment. He stood up, looked at Marlon's back, and wanted to kick him. Although Marlon had his back to Rex, he could feel Rex's movements. As long as Rex dared to kick him, Marlon would turn sideways and would definitely make Rex suffer another setback. "Hey, brotherly, don't be impulsive. Don't be impulsive." At this time, Sumu hurried to Rex's side, grabbed Rex's arm, and stopped Rex's momentum of rushing forward in time. Marx also came over, touched his uncomfortable neck, coughed a few times, and also advised, "That's right. Brotherly, don't be impulsive. Marlon is a pervert with a lot of muscular strength. You can't go up to him. If you go up to him, you might suffer. We are good men and don't suffer losses in the short term. We need to think long term. We still have a lot of time." Today, Marx also witnessed Marlon's strength. Like Sumu, he was convinced by Marlon and began to think with his brain. As a person who has experienced this, he advised Rex. "Shit." Rex spat on the ground. "So we're just going to let this guy go?" "Of course not. Brotherly, I have another plan. Come on." Sumu's eyes lit up, and he pulled Rex and Marx to the corner. The three of them started to discuss countermeasures with some chattering. As they talked, they seemed to think that the plan was very feasible, and they all showed their bright smiles like flowers. However, Rex's front teeth were missing half, so his flower-like smile was a bit ugly. Marlon noticed the three people and saw that they were still discussing enthusiastically. He lamented in his heart, "Damn these 3 annoying flies. I was too gentle with them just now. But we can't beat them to death. This is a quiet campus, not a battlefield." Marlon shook his head, helpless for a moment, found Paul, and took him to continue to the library. A lot of time has been wasted. As the two of them walked out of the classroom door, a young male teacher came towards them. He was very tall and handsome, with a high-nosed bridge, perm, and a face that looked both Eastern and Western. He must be a mixed race. He was walking straight towards Marlon. This time, Marlon was prepared. He moved to the side and pulled Paul with him. The two of them avoided the mixed-race male teacher's body. Passing by Marlon and Paul, the mixed-race male teacher did not stop, just glanced at the two of them with a sidelong glance, and walked into Class 6 of business talent with his long legs. "Who is this person?" "Our teacher." Marlon was somewhat dissatisfied with the condescending attitude of the mixed-race teacher. When he saw him enter the 6th class of business talent, he asked as he walked in, "Him?" Paul glanced at the door of the classroom. "It's our economics teacher, Gua Jiaming. Mr. Gua is a mixed race of 4 countries: Canada, the United States, Spain, and China. He came back from a top economic school abroad and was specially hired by our school. Naturally, he has the capital to be proud." At this point, Paul suddenly thought of something and whispered mysteriously in Marlon's ear. "I heard from classmates that he seems to be pursuing our counselor Dora, and he sends her flowers every day. But I don't like this person. I can tell from his attitude towards teaching. Although he has a high degree and graduated from a good school, he doesn't take teaching seriously at all. Teacher Dora is such a good person. You must not let him pursue you." Hearing this, Marlon's ears moved. He had just come to Goen Jinshio Business School for a short time, and he didn't expect that Gua Jiaming was still pursuing Teacher Lee. But Marlon can understand it. With Dora's looks and temperament, it would be strange if she didn't attract many men. "Hey, Brother Chin, I didn't expect you to be so powerful. Did you learn some kung fu back home? Can you teach me someday when you have time? I'd also like to learn a few moves from you. I also want to experience the feeling of beating up the bad guys." Paul thought of Marlon's performance in class and exclaimed in admiration, "What kind of kung fu do I know? I just learned my strength from raising pigs at home. Marlon didn't want to tell Paul the truth, but Paul might not believe it, and it's a long story. But if you want to learn a few moves, I can still teach you some practical ones. After you learn them, I guarantee you will be much stronger than the average person. Paul was not lying. If he were taught a few of the grappling techniques he knew, that would be enough to deal with most people. Marlon and Paul talked for about 10 minutes before arriving at the school infirmary. Chapter 38, The Cheating Hospital. Goen Jinsho Business School is the most famous school in Linzhou. Whether it is the campus environment or the teaching equipment, it is almost the best in Linzhou and even among the best in the country. Of course, this is also known as an aristocratic school. To be able to attend this school, you must either be extremely rich or have excellent academic performance like Paul. Therefore, the school clinic of Goen Jinsho Business School is very large and has a complete range of medical equipment, some of which are the latest medical equipment. Although the school clinic is called a school clinic, it is actually comparable to a top-notch private small hospital. It is also connected to the Linzhou First People's Hospital. Some wealthy patients of the Linzhou First People's Hospital can sometimes come to the school clinic for examinations using the latest medical equipment. Oh my God! The medical conditions and environment of this school clinic are great. Arriving at the door of the school clinic, Marlon sighed from the bottom of his heart. He observed that the school clinic had 3 floors. On the 3rd floor, there was a large red cross that was as tall as a person and could be hung in a hospital. The hall could be seen from the door. The hall floor is paved with expensive marble tiles, and there is some self-service medical equipment, all of which are the latest generation on the market. Marlon only took a glance and saw a machine in the center that measured blood pressure and body fat percentage. Marlon recognized it as the first-generation blood lipid machine that the Research Institute had just developed last year. I didn't expect it to appear here. This equipment alone would cost roughly 3 to 4 million yuan. Moreover, it is very heavy and requires a special vehicle to transport it. The shipping cost alone would be 100,000 yuan, but its measurement effect is worthy of its price. It can be accurate to 0.1%, which is more accurate than the results of blood tests, and the time is much faster, only a dozen seconds. Of course, don't you see what kind of people are studying here? They're all rich people. The facilities and environment are not good. How can they make money from you? Paul responded to Marlon and followed Marlon into the hall. When they arrived in front of the equipment, he pointed to the measurement price list next to it and said, "Brother Chin, look at this price. Is it something that poor students like us can afford?" Marlon looked in the direction of Paul's finger and saw the price. He gasped slightly, "Wow. It costs 5,000 yuan for one measurement." The operation is very simple. You just need to insert the campus card. Within a dozen seconds, the 5,000 yuan will be gone. Then an inspection report will be automatically printed. 5,000 yuan for just over 10 seconds. Simple and crude. In the hospital, a blood test or a full body checkup wouldn't cost that much. Marlon is rich. He does not fail to understand the standard of measuring money. Just like my father, Mayun, who has no interest in money, he does not think that 100,000 yuan is a small amount of money. Who would check this? Is it worth spending 5,000 yuan just to check blood pressure and blood lipids? Marlon grumbled. It wasn't that he couldn't come up with $5,000, he just didn't think it was worth it. But when Paul heard Marlon's words, he was once again certain that Marlon was a poor bastard like him. He patted Marlon's chest with sympathy and said with a smile, "Rex from our class, for example. He comes here once a month to have a full body checkup using all the equipment. How much do you think it costs to use all the equipment?" Paul didn't expect Marlon to answer. He held out a palm and flipped it. 100,000. Just these devices cost 100,000 in a month. Just a few minutes. Sigh. Even though we went to the same school as him, how can we compare with him? Paul shook his head and sighed, feeling very emotional. Marlon did not answer. He knew what Paul said was true. This world advocates fairness and equality, but it will never be fair and equal. It is class time now, and there are not many people in the school hospital, only a few. However, this school hospital is very formal, so you still need to make an appointment first. Marlon and Paul went to make an appointment. Paul looked at the ticket number in his hand with a frown on his face. Just making an appointment cost $100. This was too cruel. He knew that it would be expensive to see a doctor in the school hospital, but he didn't expect it to be so expensive. He had never been here to see a doctor. When he had some minor illnesses or pains, he would go out of school and see a doctor in a small clinic near the school. Students from poor families like him all saw a doctor in this way. This time, it was Marlon who dragged him here. But as soon as he got here, he regretted it. With 100 yuan, he can eat in the school cafeteria for a week, and that's just to make an appointment. It's unknown how much the medicine will cost later. There were not many people in the school hospital. Marlon and Paul had just sat down on the chairs in the waiting room, and less than a minute later, it was Paul's turn. A nurse asked about Paul's condition and took Paul and Marlon to an ophthalmology room. There was a middle-aged doctor inside, wearing a white coat. He was a little fat, with loose skin on his face hanging on both sides of his cheeks. He was watching a TV series on the computer with his legs crossed on the house, squinting his eyes, looking very leisurely. Dr. Zhong, the nurse spoke, briefly explained Paul's condition, and then went out. Ah! The doctor, named Zhong, yawned, stretched himself, paused the TV series, and without asking Paul the patient a question, he fiddled in the drawer for a while and found a bottle of hydrogen peroxide. Come here, I'll wash you. Dr. Zhong waved casually. Paul walked over, and Dr. Zhong poured hydrogen peroxide into Paul's eyes while yawning and with a casual attitude. Paul's eyes felt less sore after being stimulated by the cold hydrogen peroxide, so the effect was still there. Dr. Zhong took a piece of gauze from the table and was about to wipe away the hydrogen peroxide flowing from Paul's eyes. Seeing this, Paul could not help himself. Just now, Dr. Zhong's method of using hydrogen peroxide to wash his eyes was wrong. The correct method should be to let Paul lie on the bed for cleaning. There was a bed in the room specially for patients to lie down for treatment, but Dr. Zhong directly let Paul stand and cleaned him. Although it is not formal, it is correct to use hydrogen peroxide to rinse out impurities and foreign matter in the eyes. It is not a big problem to wash while standing, as long as it can wash away the impurities in the eyes. But Dr. Zhong took a used piece of gauze from the table and wiped Paul's eyes, which was too much. Marlon had sharp eyes and saw a large blood stain on the gauze. He wondered what was wrapped or wiped with it. If Paul uses this thing to wipe his eyes, and if there are any viruses or bacteria on it, Paul's eyes might be infected more seriously. Marlon had to take action. He grabbed Dr. Zhong's arm and took the stained gauze from Dr. Zhong's hand. Chapter 39: The Girl Who Jumped from the Building.